Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order.
Start with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone to the South Burlington School Board meeting. And we will start with comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda. Any public comments for agenda items that are, or any items not on the agenda? To look around. All right, we'll move on to any amendments to the agenda.
We do not have any amendments tonight.
All right. Our next agenda item is to recognize our senior student representative to the South Burlington School Board, and that is Alex Escaja Heights. And it's been my pleasure to work with you, Alex. I know I speak for the rest of the board when I say you have brought so much energy to this assignment and your role. You have represented your peers with great compassion, great courage, great conviction. And it's really been a pleasure to have your presence here at our board meetings. As much as you bring that energy, I think what I've appreciated personally is you bring great joy to all your communications and interactions and a lot of professionalism. So it's my pleasure to recognize you. Can you come up here?
Yes.
Briefly, you were elected by your peers to represent them on the Board of School Directors. Your active participation and positive contributions during the past 2 years are evidence that their trust was well placed. Leadership and service qualities such as yours are assets to be valued throughout one's life. We thank you for sharing them with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
All right, our next on the agenda, not to put you on the spot, are announcements from our student representatives.
Yeah, so we'll keep this a little brief. We have a busy meeting, but a couple things. Step Up Night was last night, which is the annual night where 8th graders come to the high school and a bunch of high school students host and discuss and tour the school with them. And that was a success. I was part of that last night. Tomorrow there's no school for high school students, which because of the PLP conferences, which I think all grades except seniors will be a part of. And then also this next week we have an event which we're calling the South Burlington School District Safety Summit. And Alex and I have been working this week of trying to get student volunteers to help with this discussion, because the way the format works is we're going to have a panel of experts with school resource officers, some school board members, and there's going to be small table discussions where we're going to be talking about a variety of different safety concerns around the school and the community, and we'd love to have students come and help facilitate some of those discussions and jot some notes down, and there is community service for that, but that's more information that we can talk about at a later time.
It is also the final week of AP exams, and they end this Friday. The South Burlington High School prom will be this Saturday, and May 9th was the bike/walk to school day at Chamberlain Elementary School.
Yeah, that's about it.
So we also have a discussion regarding condom availability protocol at the high school. And I think, Alex, you're going to be joined by a couple of folks?
Yes, by Addie and Belle. We have a presentation ready.
And just by way of background, this is a discussion today. There's no action warned, and we'll have board discussion and determine any next steps.
Okay, great. I think we're going to be going to be standing in front of that table.
Do you need help
Do you need the
advancing or
screen here?
something, or no?
Yes, that'd be great. I don't know if you-
We can figure that out for you, Alex. Yeah.
This way.
Susie, do you mind? Yeah, yep.
Oh, sure. Of course. Thanks.
So Alex, if you, can you sit in the
Yeah.
chairs and speak to the board? That'd be best. The mic's there. Even though the public's really important. Is
that my phone
Here so
or
they
no?
can help think that.
Can you put it on the chair so that I'll just go ignore it? Hello, board. We may be joined by Addie White later, but either way, we're going to get started. My name is Alex. As you know, I'm a student representative board member.
I'm Belle. I'm a junior, and I am a student at South Burlington High School.
I'm Addie. All right, could you go to the next slide? So why we have this condom availability protocol. This is an intro slide, so we're going to get into that next. Next slide, please. All right, this is you.
Condom availability will decrease obstacles by providing students with safe and free access in a place where there are trusted and knowledgeable adults. Students who are sexually active need to be able to do so in a safe way, and condoms help prevent pregnancy and STIs, of course, which is a good thing.
And we have some statistics on the slide there. Next slide.
So these are the results of the 2015 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, showing that the percent of SB students, South Burlington High School students, who are currently sexually active. So South Burlington students are, South Burlington is significantly lower than the state average. Only about 20% of South Burlington High School students are currently sexually active, and condoms are necessary to help these students who choose to be sexually active do so safely.
Next slide. The protocol also mentions Ask Peer Educators. These are advocates for sexual knowledge, Planned Parenthood peer educators. Myself, Addie, and Belle are peer educators at the school. So the protocol allows these peer educators to provide condoms to students who ask for them. Information about Ask Peer Educators should be included in the meeting materials, but there are 6 peer educators at SBHS, 5 at Essex High School, and 7 at Burlington High School. Peer educators receive 40 hours of training to serve as accurate resources for their peers to ask questions regarding healthy relationships, sexuality, and area resources like Planned Parenthood, Outright Vermont, and steps to end domestic violence. Students volunteer to be peer educators and have parental permission to participate and receive community service hours for their participation. Next slide. So next we're going to talk about some statistics and some laws that support condom availability at high schools. Next slide. So this is the Vermont Law. It requires comprehensive sex education in health classrooms. South Burlington High School teaches comprehensive sexual health education in the middle school and high school. Students are encouraged to speak with parents about values, decision-making, and healthcare services. You could click. State law also says that kids 12 and up have the legal right to consent to all kinds of sexual health services on their own. In fact, anyone of any age can get access to condoms at any of these locations locally. So we have Planned Parenthood, Vermont Cares, Outright Vermont, the Spectrum Drop-In, community health centers, and the doctor's office. South Burlington High School would simply be one more access point, and it would be a place that would be reassuring and convenient for students.
So this memo,
Rebecca Holcomb.
Rebecca Holcomb's memo
Is referenced in the
is
protocol,
referenced
yeah.
in the protocol and should be within your meeting materials. So the Vermont Department of Health and Vermont Agency of Education fully support condom distribution programs at high schools in Vermont.
And you can read this.
I'll just read the quote really quick. To promote and protect the health of young Vermonters, we recommend that school districts and supervisory unions have in place policies and procedures to implement comprehensive sex education and condom distribution programs.
Next slide.
So Also, the American Academy of Pediatrics has a policy statement that says schools should be considered appropriate sites for the availability of condoms because they contain large adolescent populations and may potentially provide a comprehensive array of related educational and health resources.
Next slide. It's you.
So the Centers for Disease Control also recommend condom distribution programs, and South Burlington High School would not be the first high school in Vermont to make condoms available to students. Harwood, BFA, St. Albans, and BFA Fairfax, Mount Abe, Burlington High School, and Barry all have implemented or are implementing condom availability programs. So SBHS would simply be joining other high schools that have already had these programs in place. Next slide.
So this is going to very briefly discuss some of the highlights of the protocol. So next slide. These are some main points. The protocol was developed by South Burlington High School students, including myself, Addie, and Belle, and other students. We consulted nurses and health teachers for any input, and it was supported by Mr. Burke. The Ask Peer educators have also led this process with the assistance from Planned Parenthood, who has supported other schools in developing condom availability programs as a consultant on the Agency of Education HIV Prevention program. So as we see here, the condoms would be provided at locations readily accessible to students without any unnecessary barriers to obtaining them. They'll be available in health offices and the athletic trainer's office from school nurses, health teachers, and Ask Peer educators. Information about proper condom use will be included, and all students will have access to it. And there will also be information to provide awareness to families and students about this program. Next slide. For cost. Here you go.
Yeah, so Planned Parenthood of Northern New England has funding to provide free condoms to any school or organization with a condom availability policy or protocol. In the event that this funding does not exist at some point in the future, condoms are available at bulk pricing to schools and nonprofits for around $70
for 1,000 condoms. Yeah.
Yeah. This shouldn't be a budgetary issue. However, for the most part, they are free.
Yeah. Next slide. And lastly, research shows that well-designed, well-implemented school-based STI prevention programs can significantly reduce sexual health risks behaviors among students, and there is no evidence of increased likelihood of students having sex throughout participation in such a program. It's actually shown to have the opposite effect, where it actually delays the first sexual intercourse, decreases the number of sexual health partners, and increases condom and contraceptive use. So there are statistics that support such a program, as you can see here, quoted from the CDC and other sources. Next slide. And yeah, that's just the fact that we are ready to start implementing this protocol, so we encourage the board to make decision on it to implement so. Next slide is just some of our references. That's it. Thank you.
Do you want to stay up here for any board questions or comments?
Yeah, I was going to open up for question. I wasn't sure if we just stay here.
Yeah, you can just stay right up there. That's great.
Yes.
Thanks.
Board questions.
So board questions, comments?
I have
Martin?
just a quick question and a comment. How many peer educators did you say is in South Burlington? I missed that.
I believe 6. I can think that. Yeah, 6.
So this, I guess, is more of a comment, maybe more for the board, that I think this is a great concept. I mean, I think that we should be doing this, but I think the decision lies, it's not really a board decision so much. I mean, we're at the policy level as far as implementation happens at the superintendent or at the school level. And I noticed that it has the principal on this. I don't think, at least that's my impression, that this isn't a board level decision, though I support the idea, and I hope that Patrick Burke or whoever actually should be signing off on this should proceed, but.
Yeah, we sought out a variety of different sources to try to get that answer. At first, we were thinking that Mr. Burke could simply sign off on it, but it was recommended that we perhaps give a presentation to educate the public.
Right.
But Mr. Young, I'm sure, could answer that question as to who has the authority to implement this.
Yeah, and I think that the fundamental question you're asking, Martin, is where in policy governance the decision-making authority resides.
Right.
I don't know if you've given that some thought, David.
No, I think it does reside with the administration, but I think given the possibility of it having a need for being more publicly vetted is a good thing, and that happens before the school board, and having it on the agenda and talked about and being able to respond to from the public to the board is an important component of policy governance. But squarely, I believe the next step really is for me to confer with Mr. Burke and the high school administration to figure out how to best move it forward, and to keep the board, in communication so that you know what's going on, which is essentially essential arm to the community and the public. Yeah. So that would be my recommendation. And next step is that I work with Patrick from some of the specifics that you heard tonight to begin to move forward. Again, working with him to do that.
Question, how many students were involved in preparing this? Or in the whole group advocating for this?
Yeah, so we did work online quite a bit. The 6 peer educators at South Burlington High School definitely were involved in creating this. We based the protocol off the one that was implemented at Burlington High School, and we also got assistance from the peer educators and other students from Essex and Burlington, and then also, with the involvement of nurses and health teachers.
Okay, thank you.
I guess,
Steve?
Elizabeth, I actually do have some questions about this. And as you all know, I'm very much about delegating authority from the board as much as we possibly can. I guess I'd just start with, and I understand that there is a lot of case law about, parental involvement is not legally required, but it does seem that in the stakeholder committee, parents are conspicuously absent. Is there any, should I just address the presenters, or am I addressing the board? Okay, good. So, protocol, but is there any reason why parents aren't part of the stakeholder group?
Yeah. I mean, we were referencing the laws that state, as we were saying earlier, that any youth has access to condoms, whether or not parents, may provide explicit permission to do so. It is a good point that perhaps parents could be involved in the committee process, or in terms of reviewing the availability of condoms at South Burlington High School. I'm not sure if you're asking about parental consent, or if just having parents involved.
Well, I guess that's another question. Is it seems like the other programs have been designed that information's disseminated home with families, and then parental opt-out is an option. Is that something that would be considered, or are there pros or cons for that?
Well,
Does anyone else want
the
to take that?
law states that kids or, adolescents over the age of 12 have access to these things if they were to go to a community health center or even a convenience store. So I think that
Parental opt-out wouldn't really be relevant or necessary in this situation, just because if they don't get it here, they wouldn't get it somewhere else.
But the school disseminating condoms isn't necessarily relevant, or, this is something that we're taking on optionally, and so requiring us to adhere to, for example, what a convenience store would be required to do. It seems like it could be an option for us, and it might be something that we'd want to solicit input from the community on. So. The other thing is students, so no student 12 or older, and I understand that that's statutory, but aren't we kind of de facto, and I realize this is under the auspices of the high school, but 12 would incorporate all the students at Tuttle too, wouldn't it?
this is just a protocol policy for South Burlington High School. It is not something that's relevant or that we're trying to implement at
We just
middle
mentioned
school
that that's
level.
the law, that is
Yeah.
12 and up have the legal access to condoms.
I'm just wondering what would be are there places outside of the high school where
Yes.
condoms would be disseminated? So under the auspices of this program, but outside of the high school, so potentially to Tuttle students?
If Title students went to a place like Outright Vermont or Spectrum or Planned Parenthood, yes, they would have access to condoms because they're 12 and up. The specifics of this protocol would only apply to the high school. So if a middle school student came in and asked for a condom, Yeah, if they ask for
Junction, adjective, verb, do that too.
if they ask for a pronoun, it would not be given to them, and they would have to seek out other sources. But they do have the ability to access condoms anywhere.
And I guess the last, it's the outcome criteria, youth risk behavior survey. And I actually, found, so we do have that data granularly by school district, but as you cited, it's from 2015. It's now 2018, so the most recently available data is 3 years old. It's a biennial survey, so that means the last baseline for which this policy was not in place would be 2017. So presumably it wouldn't be till the 2019 study where we'd have any indication of the effect of this policy, which given the current lag means it would be 2022 till we'd have any indication as to whether this is working.
Well, that's a good point. However, you can definitely look at data from other high schools. Like, for example, one of the schools that we mentioned has had it implemented since, I believe, 1994. And either way, like, contraceptive usage is not a bad thing. Whether it stays the same or increases, I doubt it'll decrease the rates of, like, STI rates or teenage pregnancies, right? So I see how that's relevant if we want to view how it affects our school specifically, but if you want to look into that and into the rates of condom usage, there's tons of studies out there with statistics supporting that making this available for students will decrease things like STI rates, teenage pregnancies, etc.
It's just that if it's serving as a tool to track results and we have real metrics, delay in first sexual intercourse, decrease in the number of sexual partners, increase in condom or contraceptive use, it just seems like we should have the protocol in place to track that. And then if I look at the data in the actual South Burlington survey, there's not a lot there. In fact, a lot of those metrics, it's NA or it's too small to sample. And so I question that we're actually going to have the ability to check those baselines and that we're going to get robust data. We can certainly reason by analogy, but then that would dispose of the need to have outcome criteria tracked.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure.
I mean, I would like
It's
to see it be
valid.
effective.
I don't know if it's as relevant
Measurably
to
so.
our decision to implementing it. I think it would be important to implement whether or not we are available to check the data, just because so few students have responded to the survey in certain areas.
That's possibly, it's probably it. It's like the response. The survey may not be an accurate representation of
Yeah,
what
it's an accurate representation. It's just that, like, so few students, for example, have used, one of those statistics is, have you used a bearing method in the last year, for example? And so few students said yes, that it's NA, because if not, we would be able to tell who the students are. But things like currently sexually active don't have NA data. They have numbers, so we could look at something like that, for example.
Yeah, no, it's just small.
But yeah, that's
Okay.
a point.
And I think, Steve, relative to your comment about community input, this is a good example of this presentation is an effort to get a message out that this is of interest and that the board will be directing the superintendent and building administrator to really evaluate the recommendation and how to move forward, too. And the one comment I would make more from an operational standpoint is I have had a chance to go into at least one other Chittenden County school, fairly dated visit, but I know you were very specific in the recommended protocol about where products would be available. And one of the things I noted in the other school was that it was evident there was a lot of access. So to me there's some balance between accessibility and also just the image you're creating when our buildings are all public buildings too. So the image you're creating, when you invite the public into your buildings and so forth. So that was one observation that, again, is pretty dated, but from a school that's had a protocol in place for a while.
They'd be at the recommended locations, nurse's office, health teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not.
Good. Any other board questions?
So the youth risk behavior survey, wasn't that taken this past fall, or isn't it due soon?
Spring of 17, but the data has not.
Still not come, yeah, okay, I thought we had data.
Come
come
on,
soon.
AHS, get on it.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Any comments or questions from the public? Yes. And
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to comment, actually.
Oh, sorry.
I don't have questions, but I want to say it seems like you did a lot of research and a lot of thought and effort went into it, and I just want to say thank you for that because it shows a real concern for the health of your fellow students. So, well done.
Thank
Yep, thanks.
All right, so if the board is in agreement, we will ask the superintendent to work with the high school principal and develop next steps.
All right. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great. All right, we will move on to agenda item 7, and this is, the topic is raising the Black Lives Matters flag at South Burlington High School. This is a discussion item on this agenda. Do we have a presentation, Susie? And Deirdre? All right, I'm going to move again. I'm going to relocate.
Yes, so I'm Ada Arms. I'm a senior here at South Burlington High School, and I'm one of the co-presidents of the Student Diversity Union.
And I'm Tabitha Moritani, also the other co-president, and I'm a junior at South Burlington High School. Thank you. Oh yeah, and Deirdre.
I am the Student Diversity Union Advisor for South Burlington High School.
So I wanted to start off by just reading our mission statement so you kind of get a feel of what our group is about. The Student Diversity Union seeks to unite students of different backgrounds to provide a safe space to discuss race and racism and to actively challenge discrimination within our school community and beyond.
And we've, throughout the year and throughout the inception of the Student Diversity Union, we've acted upon this mission statement. So, for example, we've done the blackout at SBHS 2 years in a row. We did a 13th screening and a Black Panther screening. We gave district-wide presentations supporting a race training opportunity for faculty this summer. And most significantly, we organized and facilitated the Martin Luther King Day event at Orchard and Chamberlain this year. And that was pretty notable because we were able to recognize the growing diversity of our community and the younger generations, and we were also able to recognize the growing racial consciousness among these very young members of our community. So the authors of our proposal, which is the raising of the Black Lives Matter flag, is all of the officers of the Student Diversity Union. And then, so a brief description of our proposal is, so our objective is to raise the Black Lives Matter flag at South Burlington High School every February, which is Black History Month, moving forward starting in the 2018-2019 school year. So here at South Burlington High School, we act to create an accepting and equitable and inclusive environment. And as I walk through the halls of the high school, I can see this plastered in the quotes we have on the wall or like in these words themselves, which I see walking through the halls. And we don't want these to just be buzzwords or words that are plastered on those walls. We want them to have action behind them. And we believe that in raising the Black Lives Matter flag, we will be affirming our commitment to these principles and to creating an inclusive community, because I know for myself as a white student at this school, I have always felt the reality of these principles, but that is not the case for my Black peers and my peers of color. So it's very important for us to recognize that injustice and racism permeates every structure of this country, and that includes our educational systems, and our community and our school is not exempt from that. So in raising the Black Lives Matter flag, we are recognizing this reality, And not only are we recognizing it, but we're raising a symbol saying we're willing to act on it. We're willing to act upon institutional racism, and we're willing to challenge our implicit biases. So this flag, the raising of the flag, also is significant for the Black students and the students of color at SBHS because it affirms that we value you as students, and we're going to act to create a more inclusive community that, quite frankly, does not exist for those students. And it also serves as a reminder for white students, which is myself included, that we need to continually challenge the way we view the world, and we need to confront those uncomfortable realities, and we need to listen to others and just act to expand our understanding of the world.
So some pertinent history. Since the beginning of SDU, like Ada said, we've been putting action to our words, going out into the community and actually trying to make positive change. And we were inspired by Montpelier and Burlington and Brattleboro to make this change. And we heard today Essex as well is going to be raising the Black Lives Matter flag for the rest of the school year. And I just want to say, as a person of color in South Burlington, not only South Burlington, but Vermont as a whole, I've never truly felt like I belong. And in some cases, especially at school, that I'm wanted or understood or respected. And I know waking up in the morning, I'm going to face micro and macro aggressions, whether it be from my peers or my teachers. And I think the Black Lives Matter flag represents peace and understanding and empathy, and that's something that I haven't felt at this school. And I think especially since it's, for me, a monumental moment in Black history, it would be appropriate to raise it during Black History Month. And also for the kids of color and the kids not of color, the white kids as well, to gain an understanding and awareness of what it means, and also the importance of Black history in America, since we don't learn that in our school systems.
Okay, so now moving on to our action items. So first, we request a small amount of time allotted to raise the flag according to official flag raising procedures. Second, we request a small amount of time allotted to inform students of its importance. So we imagine that this would take place in a student-led assembly explaining the significance of the flag and its meaning to the student body. So this would preferably take place during our FaceTime period, which is about 30 minutes. So it wouldn't be interrupting the school day, and while it would be led by students, perhaps the Student Diversity Union, which continually has new leaders, it would be supervised by faculty members. And essentially, we want to ensure that the flag goes up with the understanding behind it, because ultimately the symbol holds weight because of the meaning behind it. So we want to ensure that the student body understands why it's important.
And then 3, we request that the flag fly, a lot of F words, every February for Black History Month in the years following, starting in the 2018-2019 school year. And then number 4, we request that South Burlington High School provides the materials needed to raise the flag, including the flag itself. And 5, we ask for our proposal to be an action item on the June 6th school board meeting.
So we've also circulated a petition for the past couple of weeks, which has gained over 300 signatures. And our stakeholders within this proposal includes not only the parents of students at the school and the South Burlington community members, but also the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and the South Burlington Executive Student Council.
And also within the petition, our parents, community members, students. Yeah.
Yeah.
Questions? Yes.
Board members, questions, comments?
Elizabeth, there are some personal statements after questions. I don't know if you want to go before. This is the order that.
What's the board's preference?
You can take some board, or maybe there's a few other
There's
folks
just
that want to say
personal
something
statements
too.
and then a statement read by the Diversity, Equity, and
Yeah, I might recommend you do that now.
Why don't we go ahead and do that?
Yeah, so we have a statement from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee read by representatives who will come up now.
And I just
Thank you.
invite any members of the Diversity Committee who are here tonight to join me up here if you would.
So my name is Susie Merrick, and I'm here with Carrie Premsager and Dean Moline, and we are representatives of the larger committee. Oh. And Stuart Weiss is certainly a member of our committee. I might be celebrating your retirement a little too soon, maybe. I apologize. The South Burlington School District Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee supports the proposal by the South Burlington High School Student Diversity Union to raise the Black Lives Matter flag at South Burlington High School for the month of February 2019, Black History Month, and all Februaries following in the years to come. In their petition to raise the Black Lives Matter flag, members of the SDU noted the following: we endeavor to create an accepting, equitable, and empathetic environment at South Burlington High School. In raising the flag, we do not attempt to undermine the value of each and every student, but we do act to affirm the value of South Burlington's Black students. We applaud the courage of this statement and further value the clarifications students offered in reference to the Black Lives Matter movement, which is, as students noted, an affirmation of the value of Black lives in response to the racism that infiltrates every institution of the United States. In supporting the SDU's proposal, members of the SBSD Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee recognize the connection of the students' request to our own district's ENDS policy, which includes the following goals. Number 1, disposition for lifelong learning. Number 2, personal development. And number 3, citizenship. We believe the members of the SDU are modeling skills named in the district's ENDS, including, but not limited to, making decisions based on knowledge, thoughtful debate and reason, expressing themselves creatively and effectively, respectfully advocating for self and others, and supporting, participating, and/or initiating socially responsible actions to benefit the local and global community. We therefore most respectfully ask the school board to approve the request of the SBHS Student Diversity Union to raise the Black Lives Matter flag at the high school for the month of February 2019 and all Februaries following in the years to come, to affirm the value of South Burlington's Black students, and to work collectively and intentionally as a school community in addressing systemic racism. Thank you.
Good evening, board. I'm Lissa McDonald, assistant principal at the high school, and I'm here to read a letter from Patrick Burke, our principal, who couldn't be here tonight. Dear South Burlington School Board, as principal of South Burlington High School, I fully support the students presenting this evening. As principal, I stand with them in their desire to help the district send a message to our students of color that they matter. As principal, I support them in their goal of raising awareness that South Burlington is a changing community, and I accept their challenge that I do more as an educational leader to address racial inequities that exist in our system. For nearly the entire school year, I have been meeting with the Student Diversity Union and their advisor. I've been made aware of every step in their process leading up to tonight's presentation to the South Burlington School Board. Vermont social studies and civic education standards are assembled in such a manner that communicating conclusions and taking informed action reflect at least 25% of the adopted standards. In addition, the South Burlington School Board Citizenship Ends Policy 1.4 states, students will understand the impact of history, government, law, and the economy on self and society in order to contribute to their community and participate in local, state, and federal government in an informed manner by supporting, participating, and/or initiating socially responsible actions to benefit the local and global community. This policy, your policy, clearly supports what these students are doing here this evening. Sincerely, Patrick Burke, Principal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, I'm Rachel Mbaye. I'm a sophomore here at South Burlington High School, and I'm also an officer of SDU. Being a Black person in Vermont, I've experienced many instances where I've felt unwelcome in the community. Just because of the color of my skin, I'm burdened with the need to constantly be aware of my surroundings so I can determine whether or not I am safe. This exhausting task is not only put on me, but on every person of color. Raising the Black Lives Matter flag would assure Black people and all people of color that this community, our community, accepts and supports us. And even though it is just a piece of cloth, it represents so much more. It represents safety, it represents support, and it represents an environment for growth. When I was younger, I perceived Black history as something of the past. But as I have grown, I've realized that the next chapter of Black history is being written right now, and that I am a part of it. February is deemed Black History Month, and is a time dedicated to celebrating accomplishments of Black people, including this flag and this movement. It is a symbol of modern activism and a tribute to every person of color living here in America. While society portrays me as less than, this flag, this movement, and this organization make me feel as if my life, my actions, and my contributions to the world we live in matter.
Hi, I'm Sammy Premsager. I'm a senior at South Burlington, and I'm also an SDU officer. Okay. In this community, it is rare that students of color see other kids that look like them, for we live in a place where the overwhelming majority of people are white. This makes it very easy for people to turn a blind eye to the problems that people of color face within this community and in the country. Growing up biracial in South Burlington, it was evident to me at a young age that racism is existent all around me. There were countless instances growing up here that I felt uncomfortable because of something someone said about me or did because of my race. Raising the Black Lives Matter flag is an essential step in our pursuit of racial equity. Acknowledging that racism is existent in South Burlington and in the United States is extremely important in working towards a better future for every person in our community. The responsibility falls on all of us to make sure that students of color in our schools feel valued, and raising this flag would be the first step in reaching this goal.
Hi, my name is Will Jukes. I am a South Burlington senior, and I am also an SDU officer. As a white person, recognizing my privilege is something that I am constantly working on. Part of recognizing my privilege is acknowledging the effects of history and policies that have created positive outcomes for some, but not all people in our country. White people are consciously and unconsciously maintaining racist policies and practices that are prevalent in structural and institutional racism. Undoing these effects needs to be a conscious effort on everyone's part, since we are committed to becoming a more inclusive and welcoming community. The Black Lives Matter flag is important to me because the task of fighting racism should not be something that only people of color need to take care of. It should be something that all people work together on, because that is how our community will move forward. Yes, this flag will cause a lot of discussion, but we will also be starting a necessary conversation for our community. This flag will be an affirmation for our students of color at South Burlington, and will also be a reminder of the inclusive community we are all trying to foster.
So I'm going to read a statement from an anonymous South Burlington sophomore who didn't want to speak tonight for fear of repercussions. Growing up, even in this predominantly white community, I was always part of a smaller group of Punjabi people like myself. This group was always my safe space, one in which I am not at risk of harm or of judgment for my traditions. My culture is important to me, and the relationships I have made through how I identify are the most supportive relationships that I have. Without people that I trust and feel safe around, I would not be the person I am today. This trust I have is important, and I believe that Black people deserve to have this type of security in their own community as well. Raising the Black Lives Matter flag would symbolize a trusting and supportive space for Black people, one in which they are appreciated.
So I'm going to read a statement on behalf of Sophia Minette Owens, who is a South Burlington alum. Raising the Black Lives Matter flag makes me feel like I mean something in South Burlington community. As a person of color, my identity has been overlooked and belittled the entirety of my upbringing in South Burlington. Black Lives Matter, and this community has yet to show it. It is as simple as that. Thank you. And we have some more statements from more students.
Just grab one more chair. There's 4 of us.
Hi, I am Elijah Hines. I am a junior at South Burlington High School, and I'm a member of Student Diversity Union and will be co-president in the following school year. So I'd like to begin by saying that being a person of color in our community is a struggle in every sense of the word. Not only is there a lack of other people who look like me, but there is a lack of people who understand what I and other people of color go through because of our race. If we as a school raise the Black Lives Matter flag, I guarantee that I will not be the only person of color to appreciate the action done by this school board and the school itself. The Black Lives Matter movement is one that allows the minority of this school, this city, this state, and this country to voice their concerns with the situations they have been systematically and institutionally placed into. The movement allows for the victims of racist housing practices, unequal prison sentencing, as well as those killed unjustly or have had due justice withheld, finally have a voice. And that is what this flag is about. The assertion that my life and the lives of other people of color matters to this school and, more importantly, this community. With the raising of this Black Lives Matter flag, there is an acknowledgement of the injustice that Black people have faced in this country. This acknowledgement, especially because this will be done through Black History Month, will allow for a greater outreach into the problems Black people face in our community and give us the platform to speak about these issues openly with the people we see in school every day. Thank you.
My name is Sophie Bach. I'm a junior at South Burlington High School and a member of Student Diversity Union. Raising the Black Lives Matter flag during Black History Month would be a way to unite and celebrate the people of color in our community and around the world. In such a dominantly white area like Vermont, we are not exposed to a lot of diversity. Because of this, it becomes easy for us to ignore racial issues and lessen the importance of equality. It is crucial for white people to address racial issues and stand as allies with minorities. It is our responsibility to educate ourselves on these issues and also understand that we will never fully understand what it's like to walk in the shoes of a person of color. As a young person in America, I am being exposed more and more to controversy, violence, and clashing points of view in our country. It is clear the world needs more empathy. For hundreds of years, people of color have been put down and abused, and it is time we step up and send some love their way. This should not be a controversial issue. People with less awareness must put aside their pride and change their perspective. This is about a larger issue of systematic racism. We must acknowledge the injustices that people of color have been dealing with for generations and show that we are working hard to make our future better for everyone. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Navia Wilcox. I'm a junior at BHS. I'm going to tell you guys a little story. So in 2003, my mom packed up my bags, and before I knew it, I was on my first flight to Vermont. Back then, I couldn't put together the questions I needed to ask, like why would we move halfway across the country, but it wasn't until 7th grade I asked my mom one day, what was wrong with Florida? After a long day of students at my high school, or at my middle school, calling me the N-word, making fun of my quote-unquote horse hair, addressing me with racially insensitive names, and she answered me saying, I didn't want you to be raised around that gang-like stuff, you know? I want you to have a better future. I wish I had said, how's that better than here? I'd rather be there. Instead, I shut my mouth and beginning to chemically straighten my hair, dressing more presentable to school, and I even could find ways to lighten my skin. I was afraid to stay outside in the sun because I thought it was getting darker. It wasn't until sophomore year in high school that I finally felt like I was significant in every way. I felt like I finally mattered. To clarify, Black Lives Matter is not anti-police, it is anti-bias, which applies to many things. The amount of blacks that have been disproportionately arrested across the country, the rape and sexual assault of black women across the country, and low-income black families that struggle to make a living across the country every day. In many other forms of discrimination and racism that blacks still face to this day. But more importantly, by standing by this statement, you support the appreciation of black beauty, the impact of black power, and the social changes that can come when you use your voice. All of these issues are a lot closer to home than we think and tend to believe. When we raised the Black Lives Matter flag at our school, we understood that it was just a flag, but it was the questions and critical thinking that made it a statement. It's time we stop speaking of equality and equity and take action all around Vermont.
Grace Nicole Albrecht, and I'm a sophomore at SBHS and also a member of Student Diversity Union. I support raising the Black Lives Matter flag at my school. It is not enough to learn about slavery once a year. It is not enough to have diversity trainings. It is not enough to have no school on Martin Luther King Day. We have to recognize the injustices going on all over the country every day. You can't paint racism as something of the past. The first step to help fight racism in this country and this state is to talk about it. I believe that raising the BLM flag will spark important dialogue about how people of color are treated differently by police and citizens than their white neighbors. Many Vermonters believe that our state is one of the most inclusive and welcoming in the country. That is not true. People of color in Vermont are 4 times more likely to be pulled over by police compared to their white citizens, despite being less than 2% of the population. This is a pattern that has to be stopped. By raising the Black Lives Matter flag at SBHS, we are showing that 1, we stand in solidarity with the victims of police brutality, and 2, we ally behind people of color in Vermont that are profiled by police. Thank you.
It's not a question, it's just, so I had the opportunity to go to the raising of the flag in Montpelier, at the Montpelier High School, and it was a great experience. It certainly was moving, it was poignant, but I mean, the focus of it did raise awareness. Black History Month can kind of pass by, but the assembly was such a critical part of it. And there were speeches, and people were really pointing out the situations that they are faced, and really the awareness of the inequalities that are being faced in the schools themselves. And there were quite a few legislators there as well, and that really sparked some work we did in the legislature as well, trying to work towards having a more inclusive curriculum. I don't know where that ended up by the end of the session, but it's something that will be ongoing. But I mean, it really gave voice to, I think, something's very important. So, I'm going to certainly be in support of getting this on our action for June 6th. So, I just wanted to.
Thank you. Thank you.
So.
Steve?
Yeah, I'll say, I'm going to be honest with everybody here. When I got here this evening, really the only familiarity I had with the raising of the flag was at Montpelier. I guess at UVM, happened at UVM a couple years ago, and then Montpelier in Burlington. And my own sort of familiarity with the American flag is through my service in the military. And, we're very inculcated in customs and courtesies and sort of the sacredness of, the flag. And, there's protocol for also flying the state flag and various military flags, country flags. And so I wrestled with, I don't know how I feel about, fixing another standard to the flagpole. And I went as far, I asked David and Patrick, have we done this in any other instance? And Pat indicated, yeah, for 20 years, I think 15 years ago, Tibet, some students wanted to recognize Tibetan independence. But otherwise, there hasn't been, any other similar instance. And I'll tell you, my inclination was to say no. And hearing everybody tonight, my heart's changed. And so I am supportive. I thought you all needed to hear that. I really came here tonight thinking that I would be the GOAT, as I was with Alex just about 20 minutes ago. But you've changed my mind. I do think that it would be helpful to the board, however, to think about, and I appreciate you guys have given us a lot of lead time. February is quite a ways off. I think it would be helpful to adopt a policy so that we have consistent treatment and aren't confronted with situations, well, you raised this flag, you need to raise this other flag or this other flag. And so I think we should give some thought to, actually, I'm sorry, I'd also ask David, is there a policy? There is no policy, so we can't look to any guidance. But we might consider creating guidance just so that we're consistent in our treatment going forward. And as with many things, I would be quite happy to say, and we delegate authority to the principals of their respective buildings as far as making decisions like this in the future. Just as I imagine, when you decide to put the flag at half-staff, that's often the jurisdiction of local authority, like, say, a principal. So anyway, I wish you all Godspeed.
Other board questions? I did have one question, David, but within policy governance, again, based on our previous conversation, where would the decision-making authority reside for the recommendation of accepting the proposal?
Yeah, I think it does rest squarely with the administration. Where I think in policy governance, when there's a specific focus that rises to the level that may be of heightened concern of the community, then that's where the board becomes involved. We've had some experience of this in the past, and at my discretion, these are the recommendations that, number one, as we spoke before, that they come before the board, and we determine the interest, the compassion from the community and the public before we quickly make a decision. My feeling is that this particular item is one that needs to have a conversation, just like we've had tonight, and just like it allows for some more specific input to the board, and doesn't solely rest on just the administrator in this case making a decision without the board or through the warned board process. So I think that this is exactly following the way it should. It comes before the board. You're asking about whether this should be guidance or policy. That would be back to me. That would be back with me and Mr. Burke and his administration and staff for us to work out how best to move this forward, keeping the board in the loop. If it's a policy recommendation, then it's got to come back before the board to be read, 3 times before action is taken. I'm not absolutely sure what that next step would be, but again, I want to be fair to the process, which would be involving the high school administration, some of my critical team to determine that path. Bottom line is we've shared this publicly, and I think I've received some pretty good guidance also from the students, and also I'm assuming you guys will give me some further direction on what you might like to see. Some of you already have. So.
I just want to say I'm fully in support of raising the flag. And again, I am just impressed by our students and how hard they work and the thought they put into this. And I'm delighted by it. The one concern I had as I listened to everyone's personal statements is a deeper question of what's missing in our community. Because as a lot of people have said, it is just a flag raising and there's an opportunity for discussion, but it feels like that discussion needs to go on, not just during Black History Month, but it feels like there's something missing in the community. And I think I would challenge all of us, and I would challenge the Student Diversity Union as well, to to sort of think of recommendations of ways that we can change those core issues and try to make things better at a deeper level, rather than just continue a conversation. Like, what changes, for example, can we make to curriculum, or what other things can we do in our community that will make Black students and all students of color feel more welcome here and really feel like they are equal parts of the community. So that was my only sort of concern as I listened to the discussion.
Like we stated before, we had presented for the elementary schools and the middle school and the high school about race training for the teachers. Personally, for me, I think that's where a lot of the misguidance in education comes from, because if a teacher is teaching, you're going to think that what they're saying is, correct, because that's what you should believe. But in my experience, a lot of the time, teachers have come up to me and touched my hair, or teachers mistake me for another person because of my skin color. I've even been mistaken for a boy before. And so it's just kind of, I think it has to start with the teachers, because that's where I'm seeing a lot of the mistreatment of education, I would say.
Yeah, so just as was stated, we need to change the culture surrounding how we as a school interact, specifically faculty to student, but also I think that as a white student, it needs to be imparted upon the students as well. So whether that's by having a mandatory class where you learn about issues of race and racism, like at our school we have Race and American Society, a class, but it's an elective, so it's one of these things that a student needs to take upon themselves, and if that's the case, most likely the students taking these classes are already recognizing the climate around them and have a greater outlook than just that nearsightedness. So if we are to implement a class that would make it necessary for all students to address this question, which is part of why the raising of the flag is so important, is because it requires all students to see that as they come into school each day, and it requires them to become a part of the conversation whether they not want to or not.
Steve, one clarifying question to you. Are you anticipating or recommending that the board and through the superintendent develop a policy before taking action?
I don't know that we need to be that bureaucratic. We may even decide that this is something that is delegated to the superintendent, but we should, I think, just as a way to address future questions that may come to us, or maybe, something that would not be desirable to do, that we have some sort of consistent approach or some sort of documented consistency of approach. But I'm indifferent as to whether that needs to be a board policy or something lower down.
So let me just, Alex, go
Yeah,
ahead.
quick question. I think there's a great amount of energy going on right now in this room, and I'm really happy with it. I'd hate to have all the momentum that's been built up now try and coast until February. If you wanted to raise the flag sooner, I might be supportive of that. I don't know if the board wants to sign off on that, but we've got about, just a few weeks left in the school year. We haven't discussed it, it's not on the agenda, but I would hate to have everything just stop and wait about 8 or 9 months.
Yeah, our original intent was to have it for the remainder of the school year, and then February's moving forward, or however it works out. We just found that more resistance was more apparent with that, so we decided to keep it to February in hopes that in the future, once it becomes kind of accustomed to the students, then we could raise it for the school year, but we're definitely not opposed to raising it for the end of the school year. That's not, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, Martin?
On that issue, I think it has to be an assembly. I think it has to be a big deal. It can't just be raising the flag. And I think making sure we plan this right, or whoever's going to do it, plan it right for February, I think. If we had thought about it earlier, then but the school year is running out. And to be able to plan something that really should be an awareness building, and it should be celebratory as well, that we need to make sure we have the time. But I would think, my opinion is that, this is the kind of decision that probably should be with the administration, but I think we should have a recommendation from the administration. The board should weigh in on this, so there's the we
That's-
representing the
that's a good idea.
community,
Yeah.
also in support of this. So I would recommend we put it on the June 6th meeting for action.
That was going to be my only concern about trying to raise it this year, is that June 6th is so close to, it's, 10 days before we're really done
Yeah,
with
I know.
school. That's a little bit
Right.
challenging to sort of have some kind of recommendation come out of that meeting and then really plan something thoughtful before the end of the school year when everyone disappears.
I mean, I'll give you firsthand testimony. The compelling thing is you all making your case.
Yeah.
Take the time to make your case to people, and I think you'll win them over. I really do.
I do think you just got to volunteer for an event coordinator.
Well, that's administration.
We're kind of at time for agenda, but I would like to open it up for a few comments or questions from the public, and then we'll decide. Jerry?
So I came here with a lot of thoughts, and now I'm wondering whether the word's saying, but I'm going to say a few. So a request to start with. For those of you who feel compelled to say racism is endemic in every aspect of society, I would appreciate it if you would say, it's my belief that racism is endemic in every aspect of society. Until you can show me publications in peer-reviewed literature which documents that that statement is true, it's your belief until proven in the peer-reviewed literature. And David, if you don't understand the importance of that to the students, your school system has serious problems. It's the same thing with saying, because of white privilege, every white person is a racist. I'm a Jew. Please don't tell me about what racism is all about. 6 million people of my faith were marched into gas chambers because of their religion. I know what racism is, and just because my skin is white doesn't mean I'm a racist. When you raise a flag that says Black Lives Matters, what you're doing is you're reminding people that skin color exists in our society, and it certainly does. But when you raise that flag, you're reminding people that there are black people and there are white people. And I question whether you're going to achieve the goal of equity in society by reminding people of skin color as opposed to reminding people of their humanity. And I think you may not achieve the goal you're trying to achieve by raising that flag, because the reason why the crazy person at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and I apologize to those who voted to them, won that election was because a lot of people got tired of being told what to think, how to speak, what language is acceptable as gender. And people know what injustice is. They don't need to be reminded of it by having a flag which specifically applies to a group of individuals in our society. Most people experience injustice in their lives. You don't need to raise a flag to remind people. Now, for the people who are committed, I'll finish my statement with an answer. For the people who believe in it, that's fine. But you have to remember, you're trying to win across the people who don't agree with raising that flag. And I question whether those people are going to react by saying, I agree that Black Lives Matter. Why are you rubbing my face in your beliefs? I would encourage you to get the opinion of the community, because lots of people I speak to say, of course Black Lives Matter, just as the lives of Afghani women matter, just as the lives of women and children in Yemen matter, just as the lives of Palestinians in Gaza matter. They all matter. Why just one flag, one group of individuals? You're reminding people that we live in little hamlets. And what you want to do is remind people of a global humanity. And if you're not teaching that to students, David, in the school system, then we have a bigger problem than even thought, and I've always believed we have a big problem in our society.
So.
Hold on, we're not listening to the dialogue.
Okay.
We were told that we weren't going to open it up for a public discussion.
It's not for a public discussion. I'm just opened up for public questions or comments that would be directed at the board. So, and we're kind of at time, but I will take a couple more. Yes, sir.
Hi. I'm Ravon Calderon. I'm a senior from Burlington High School, part of the Social Justice Union, and directed towards the board. I didn't hear anything about it, but I'd like to address the difference between the All Lives Matter flag and the Black Lives Matter flag. And that being, we were able to get the flag raised, and we had an assembly with the same sort of situation. And in that assembly, I talked about the All Lives Matter flag, and the reference I used was that if you go to the doctor with a broken arm, but the doctor says, well, hold on, like, let's take a look at all your bones, it doesn't really solve the problems that are at hand. compared to Black Lives Matter, which is supporting the least represented group of people within our nation. And I think a large part of the Black Lives Matter flag is to get people of color and black people within our nation to a point where they feel welcome, so we can start making some actual change within the nation.
One more, if we'll have to move on. Yes.
My name is Carrie Fantelli. I'm a South Burlington community member and a mother of one of the young ladies that spoke tonight. And I have an idea, since June is coming soon, and I hear that, I think maybe raising it as the beginning of the school year, as like an induction of the start of the school year, and instead of doing it in February, September would be a really great time to show this community, like, we are supporting this group of students and students of color, and we really are making a difference in making these changes, so we do understand that, quote unquote, all lives matter. And so I do believe that raising the flag before February is a grand idea, and I support that, and I suggest doing it at the beginning of the school year. And then I really would welcome the care with getting really stuck on policy and procedure, because I know that that can be a roadblock, and it can also be a protective way to prevent us from making a lot of procedural changes. So let's think from our hearts, and let's move with our hearts, and let's live from our hearts instead of getting really caught up in policy. Thank you.
So it sounds like we've got a recommendation to put this on the June 6th agenda, and that we'll warn it for action at that point. There will be opportunity for further discussion at that meeting as well. Is the board in agreement?
Yes.
All right, by nods and consensus, we'll be talking about the agenda further. I will say thank you to all the students who spoke. I am reminded whenever I hear each of you speak just how articulate and how mature and well-spoken each of you are. I'm always impressed when we have students at our meetings. So thank you for your preparation and your comments.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So this is a student who's a junior who's from Spain, and he's wanting to take it.
To our agenda, to the rest of the board. I understand there was an individual that wanted to make some comments during the public session, agenda number 3. So we're going to spend a couple of minutes accepting those comments. Hi. Could you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon to all the board. I'm Ilya Savchenko. I'm a junior at South Burlington High School, and unfortunately, I would just want to begin that you are pretty much my last hope in my issue, and I will just explain. We'll try to summarize my issue.
Sorry.
Should this be discussed in executive session if this is a one-person issue?
It's the individual's choice to make comments in public session.
Want to discuss it publicly?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because nobody listened to me back in high school. So
should we give him the option? Do you want to talk about it privately?
I don't think he does, Alex. He was given.
I don't care,
Okay.
to be honest. I really it's not a big it's
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm originally, I used to live many years in Spain, and I came here to study. And about 2 weeks ago, from Spain, they called me for the courses they can attend. It's maritime, it's profession courses, so you can get the profession there in terms of maritime studies. And I have tried to leave before the end of the school year, which is on 15th of June, right? I have tried to leave at 28th of May, right? And I start getting the signatures of this, as you have this paper, of the leave, right? The early leave or planned absence, right? And all the teachers have signed. However, I haven't informed them, and I also obviously want to be honest, and I haven't informed them that the principal of the school have denied it previously to me. But nobody presented an issue, like personal issue, that I could leave. They said I'll be able to make up my work for that period of time, right? So I presented all the signatures to the principal, but Principal Mr. Burke continued to deny my petitions. And I just also want to mention that I've been waiting for that course for over 2 years. It was really important for me. And I also asked him what will happen if I will withdraw, as he called it, earlier than the scheduled time, right, the end of the school year. And he told me that I will lose my credits for the second half of the year, all my credits that I have earned. And for me, this is a big loss because I want to keep living here in the United States. I just wanted also to mention that this knowledge that I could achieve in that course, I would definitely use it here in U.S. territory. So it will attribute to my probably to my ability to get a job in the future, so I can become active citizen and pay my taxes in the future. And this country was built by the people with their taxes, right? So I could have contributed to that and be much more eligible in the labor market after completing that course over there. And just to emphasize using it here. So as I said, I made a lot of petitions with the principal, and I also have spoken with the Mr. Superintendent David Young. And everybody told me that the final decision is on the principal, on Mr. Berg. But they also told that there's a commission above him, which are you, all of you, right? So that's why I decided to come and try my last chance to. And as I said, just again to emphasize, all the teachers said they were okay with that, like personally okay, but not okay as long as Mr. Burke doesn't approve that. So they wasn't agree as long as the administration doesn't approve that. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what is the process with a student matter of this nature?
Well, again, there's some level of immediacy that he's talking about because he's got a maritime program that's in Spain. And again, Mr. Burke's decision was one that was, vetted, I believe, by his staff and his guidance people. And again, wanting to support all students, but all students is also specific to attendance and course responsibilities. At no time did Mr. Burke necessarily say you can't go. Certainly, it's an opportunity that is recognized. That said, the carrying of or completion of the course program, there's some important components. So Mr. Burke had said no, and as a result, I also said no. We've had a nice opportunity to get to know each other and meet. But in the end, I think it's clear that we have other students that are also making, having to travel the same path, and there's course completion opportunities that need to be attended to. So I think it's important that this board gets the chance to hear from the student and also understand a little bit about the background and kind of the course summary that's needed. So that's where we're currently at. What would be the process? Again, the board, the board is not, I don't believe, can be prepared tonight to make any sort of decision. You haven't necessarily gotten all of the background. I think you're looking for an immediate decision. It was my understanding, like tonight, right?
Well, over there, back in Spain, they told me that decision must be made by Friday. So by Friday, I must call them and answer what's going to happen. But again, to emphasize, all the teachers said that there was no problem. I'll be able to make up all the work, and I really want to go to college. So Burke did offer me opportunity, as you mentioned. Obviously, I can leave. I'm not strained in the prison here, but definitely he also told that I will lose my credits, and this will greatly impact on the time needed to completion of the high school, and also as time staying in high school. It's also I'm prolonging more my entry into the labor market, right? and becoming a taxpayer and an active person who will support this country. So using
not
your
all it's
taxes,
cracked up to be, you know.
community.
It's not all it's cracked up to be.
Sure, no, but I'm just saying right now, for example, I'm living on a social Medicaid and all kind of things.
So
and
I think one of
using
the questions
social
is
benefits.
with the timing being of the essence in terms of this student, this board doesn't really have an opportunity to really evaluate it, and our inclination, I will tell you out of the gate, is to support administrators' recommendations as it relates to current practice and so forth. I guess my question, David, is there, if the board, I don't know what the commitment is to a board-level review of situations like this, but if there is that element built into our practice, would it be sufficient to have a delegated subcommittee, be able to look at the recommendation and respond in a more timely manner to address the time frame you're talking about? I don't know if that's an adequate
I
solution.
think the answer is that you need something by Friday, and I feel like in order to do that, you're going to need, we're going to need to assemble kind of what the specific request was, what Mr. Burke's response was, what was the rationale for the denial, where did I fall into that, and rationale and reason, whereby which a subcommittee of the board would be fine to then determine whether that meets your expectations or not, or whether then you want to say we want to create some leniency there. That would
Well, I don't want to open up to a process that isn't something we should be adhering to, but I'm trying to think where we have done work in the past and what might address.
Well, again, I think it goes kind of to policy governance. Like
Right.
we know, is there a particular policy that would be in play here? Treatment of staff and students, there's probably a place that we could go. I'm just thinking on the policy governance side, and to identify some of those pieces, and that would be the avenue in which that would be evaluated, the decision of the administration. Was there a policy violation? No. Did we follow the policy?
Looks like Martin has a comment.
Well, I think one thing I would want to see what the rationale for the decision was. I look at it in the background and I mean, not knowing anything about the basis of the decision, but the fact that we're pushing for flexible pathways and those kind of things. But I'm obviously only hearing a very small part of it, and I would need to see what the rationale is to even see if we should take a next step.
Well, are you available to serve on that? I mean, I know.
The next couple of days, yeah.
Yeah, and I could do that too. But if I'm sorry, I'm not speaking directly to you at this point, but if the avenue of a student approaching the board directly in this particular case was open, I think we need to make sure we have some board-level review of the decision-making process. And if Martin and I can be available and the rest of the board is comfortable that you'll delegate a board review to the subcommittee, then hopefully that will address your concerns. No guarantees on the outcome, but as I said, as a board, we tend to support administrative recommendations, but we will review the decision-making process. Is that fair,
last
David?
Comment. We're gonna do little. I just got to know, not mentioning the name, but there was in the middle of the year, again, this different situation. In the middle of the year, there was some planned leaves for 2 weeks, and they were accepted. In this case, it's true, it is 3 weeks, and it's in the end of the year. But it's just 1 week longer than some of the planned absences that are new through the year that were accepted at that time without any problem.
Right.
But this time is.
Does that meet with?
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 8, city-school collaboration. You want to take that?
Okay, so on the city-school collaboration, this is specific to the LOI. We did have what I think would be a small committee, city and school, to look at and meet, and that did happen. As a result, we're in currently cordial and appropriate dialogue with the city on the development of an LOI, and it will be back on the agenda for the next board meeting. So there's some open and appropriate discussions happening relative to that. Collegial, thank you. Yes, that too. Yeah. So that's really all I have to report on the, on the subcommittee slash LOI.
Any other comments? Okay. All right, well, that's all we had on that one. That
Yep.
was warned for action in order to preserve the opportunity for action. There's no action that's going to be taken tonight. And that was directed at Patrick.
It is back on again, and it will be on the June 6th meeting. We also have the opportunity we put it on for tomorrow.
It's actually on tomorrow too, yeah.
So can we tell Patrick that it's not going to be action tomorrow either? So
I think
if
that's
this is
safe.
the only reason he's coming tomorrow. He doesn't have to, although we'd love to have you there.
I think it's good that he comes.
Yeah, I think he should have to. Yeah, we might have action on it tomorrow, Patrick. You better come. Only once.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 9, statewide healthcare plan update and third-party administrator. This is a discussion item.
We'll see you.
Martin, do you have any updates on, from a legislative standpoint? My understanding is the session closed
No.
with no
No,
statewide
supposedly
healthcare
we're coming
plan.
back next week, but yeah, nothing happened with respect to healthcare, but it's still on the table. So we'll see what happens.
My understanding, the last configuration of the bill from the Senate included a commission that would have representation from Vermont NEA and
It would still be VHI, is my understanding. But they would change the governance structure where it's more equal representation, correct?
I
and-
didn't know the last, I'm just
Yeah, well,
recalling. Okay.
that was last week early, so no telling what it was by the end of the week. But the concept was that there would be negotiation at the state level for health insurance to be completed by December of this year. But again, things are so up in the air that it's hard to,
So this may come up in the
almost
session then.
certainly.
Okay. All right, and then we also wanted to have as a discussion item a third-party administrator. I don't know if you want to do that, or John? I can certainly
Well, again, I
offer
think,
some comments.
as everybody knows, the board knows that there was a third-party administrative significant change. It changed pretty significantly, not only for us, but across the state, the way in which those kind of disbursement of funds and opportunities would happen. And so, as a result, we've been working hard to make the transition collaboratively to DataPath. And so we've been, again, working through that process at the same time trying to make sure we're providing information and answering questions to our employee group, all employee groups. And so we've, again, every day is a little bit of a new day as we find out and work through things. But yesterday I did send out, a delineated kind of Q&A. It certainly was not totally conclusive, I recognize that, but again, some of the major points that needed to be shared so that there was clarity around what the process would be. So that's where we're currently at. I don't know if there's specific additions that want to be highlighted, Elizabeth, or
Yeah, and just for clarification, this is addressing the issue of the third-party administrator that provided, I don't know, how would you describe the service provided, John? The reimbursement?
Yeah, for many years, had a flexible spending account under the Section 125 regulations of the IRS. And this year, we added a health reimbursement arrangement that dealt with employer monies for deductibles and co-payments that employees might incur. And so that piece was added to the third-party administrator's role, if you will, in January. Didn't work out very well, and we're transitioning to a new, different supplier.
But to
Well-
be clear, it's not just our issue, it's a
Oh,
statewide issue, so.
There's almost every district in the state
that didn't work out well is really the company that was contracted is exiting the business.
original one.
Not even mid-year. Actually, didn't they exit effective April?
Yes.
So I think
We're
they're.
confident that the new company is gonna be able to clean up, the system, and people will be much happier with it.
So in terms of the implications to employees right now, how is that? I know in my BHI role, I heard some examples, but in
Third-party
your perspective.
administrators have a primary role for interfacing with the employees and between the health insurance company and the employees. And employees should feel free that they can call someone, they can look at an account statement online, they can get explanations, and be eligible for whatever reimbursements they're entitled to. And I think that's going to happen. It certainly has not happened in every case, to date with the old administrator. But I think it's clear that this new company is capable and up to the task.
Other questions from the board? Any questions from the public?
Hi, I'm Noah Everett. As of today, the co-president of the SBEA.
Congratulations, Noah.
That's what's in order.
Congrats.
It's all good.
I don't know. But I just kind of want to make sure that the SBEA and the board have some clarity around how we have experienced this and what we see as the lay of the land. Because I think there's some things that in the discussion haven't come up so far. And really, they boil down to three major pieces. The idea behind how healthcare was going to change January 1st and what was bargained over has never actually been realized. Mostly because future planning was not able to do what they had promised they would do. So we understand that there's no way you could have not taken them at their contractually signed word, as in all the other districts and supervisor unions who chose to do that. So this isn't, and if it sounds like it, just stop me, it's not meant to be a recrimination of that choice. But it's really important to our members and employees that you guys are aware of the kinds of things that are happening and are likely to continue to happen, and how we view them as not following through with what we all together signed up with. So first, and most importantly, as far as we transition to data path, is that part of what future planning committed to do, and was the understanding that the SBA entered in with the board, is that the reimbursements would go directly to providers. And that's what they committed to do. So you went to the doctor sent the bill to Blue Cross Blue Shield, they paid their part, they passed it on to future planning, and future planning paid the provider. DataPath is not willing to do that at this time. I have heard from different people, some with VHI and some not. So I don't know really who to trust, really, that there may be a point in the future where they are willing to do that, but I don't think that, as far as I can tell, I'm saying that's beyond me. At this moment, what they're saying is they're not willing to pay directly to providers, as was anticipated by the agreement. The second thing is that, and I think the language used during bargaining is fully integrated health reimbursement arrangement. I always want to call it an account, but it's an arrangement. So correct me if I get my acronyms wrong. And that fully integrated idea was part of that reimbursement piece, and then there's also a prescription piece, which is very challenging right now. And I think as far as actionable things the board can consider along with administration is how to bring what is actually possible back as close to what was agreed upon as possible. And so one of the things, given that DataPath will not pay directly to provider, is the ability for people to how they pay when they go to the pharmacy. So currently we have a cost sharing arrangement, and one of the ways that you access that cost sharing arrangement was going to be an integrated debit card, where you would go to the pharmacy and you would swipe your debit card. The first, depending on your plan, and just because they're most salient in my mind, I'm going to use the family plan numbers. So depending on your plan, you had a certain amount of out-of-pocket maximum, which was $1,000 for a family plan. And then the district paid the next $4,000 up to the $5,000 out-of-pocket maximum. So you'd go to the pharmacy, they would ask for whatever that drug costs, you'd swipe your card, and if you put in the FSA, which was combined in this, your $1,000, the money would come out of there until you reached a certain level, and then it would go to the district's funds, and then eventually VHI would take over for co-insurance. It gets more and more complicated the farther down you go. But essentially, you would just, that's how you would get access to your medications. And then currently, VHI stepped in, so people have experienced this problem before, and I think we'll experience it again, but what's going to happen after this with the current arrangement as issued by the district is that when an employee goes to the pharmacy, and I can talk a little bit about how it's different than the medical expenses in a minute, but when an employee goes to the pharmacy, they have to pay whatever that is up front. And that amount can greatly exceed their out-of-pocket maximum. So that same person on a family plan who has the $1,000 in their FSA goes to the pharmacy, and if their medication costs $1,500, which is, I haven't heard of anybody that happening, but it's possible, then they have to actually put up $1,500 somehow, or they don't walk away with those medications, period. And that at some point in the future, DataPath suggests it's going to be very quick. You will get that employee gets reimbursed for that money, depending on where they are in that $1,000. So if it was $1,500 and you hadn't paid your $1,000, then you'd pay $1,000. You get reimbursed for the remaining $500. Point of sale. And for employees, what this resulted in before is some people being like, I don't have that money right now, salient. And so they walked away without those prescriptions. And I'm very concerned that that will happen to our members again, that they'll go. It's a change for them. We've been paying co-pays for 25 years and have that immediate expense and not know how to actually have the money available to do it. So that's a big thing, and there is remedy for that within what DataPath is willing to do. However, as we said, the things we agreed upon and the spirit of those things pose some challenges. So DataPath is not willing to do the debit card if employees' dollar is first dollar in. And the spirit of our arrangement is that it would be employees' dollar, first dollar in. That's how we had discussed it and negotiated it. And that's the agreement. And so DataPath won't do that upfront spending because it's an administrative nightmare. I can go into more detail if people have questions about why that is, because it took me a long time to understand. And I got some answers finally tonight. But if it's employer first dollar in, then they will do the debit card because those administrative things go away. The reality is also that we can do that without putting employer first dollar in other medical expenses. So they can split that out. So for the prescription benefit, it could be district first dollar in, but for medical expenses, it could remain employee first dollar in. And to my knowledge, that was not even something that ever was discussed with future planning because they said we can do whatever. Donut holes, all kinds of things. And so the guidance provided to employees suggests that that's not going to be a benefit available and that employees will have to pick up that out-of-pocket expense for whatever period of time it takes. I am also optimistic that DataPath will do better than future planning because I don't see it possible they could do any worse. But the belief I have that there will be 100% success 100% of the time is also, I find that very hard to believe. So some period of time along the way, a major accounting and new functionality of keeping track of all of these things and holding DataPath accountable as well as Blue Cross Blue Shield accountable in new ways for all of our members. And especially in this new rollout that has not rolled yet, really trying to make sure that people can manage these changes with the minimal health and financial burden. And so I'm very hopeful that we can continue to work, and I understand that there was a lot of pressure to provide guidance because people didn't know what to do and the blackout and all that. But hopeful that we can work as the SBA with this body, and I think also with the other groups, to come to at least a short-term, if not longer-term agreement about how both parties can see their way through this. Because I think in general, we both want the employees to access good quality care, timely fashion, that they've been accustomed to. I certainly am available if you want to ask specific questions about all those pieces or the debit cards. I've been doing a lot of reading and a lot of learning. Got a lot of nice phone calls.
Any other questions?
I think I
Good.
understand this pretty well. Thank you for the explanation.
All right.
Right.
Thank you, Noah. Thanks, appreciate that.
I did give the copy board of what went out to,
Okay.
that Noah referenced, around, again, as I said, the Q&As that I spoke about earlier. I just gave you the copies.
I didn't ask, but is there any other public comments? We're running out of public. All right, we will move on to legislative update.
It's not really fair to put it on our legislator, but there's been so much activity that I honestly, I know that.
It'll be very quick.
Oh, thank you, Martin.
The
Well,
updates
let's
from
be
me will
quiet.
Very quick. The special ed bill did pass both houses and is on its way to the governor. I need to look at it a little bit closer to tell you, or you may be able to tell me after you look at it a little closer exactly where it landed, but it is going to be a change which is aimed at it's not going to happen right away. I think it's a 5-year ramp to where phasing it in, where we'll get essentially a block grant. That's not what it's called, but a certain amount of money based on how many students that we have. And the good part, and actually Noah probably knows a lot about this. I think he testified early on. But the supposed good part of it is the flexibility that it's going to provide school districts in spending their special education money. But before I get myself in any more trouble on that, I need to really research that a little bit more with David and Joanne to really understand the implications of that bill. Other than that, I mean, I could report what they passed out in the tax bill, but it'll be a waste of time because it's going to change over the next 2 to 3 weeks. The funding, and I can tell you it's not going to be moving to an income tax component. I mean, that's off the table. The biggest question is how much one-time money is going to be used to drive down the property tax rate for this year. The concept from the governor's side of is that he has various cost-saving measures that he's proposed that will make up this money over the next few years. And the Joint Fiscal Office looked at this and said, well, probably not. And it is concerning because those cost-saving measures also mean more control from the state as far as what local school districts are allowed to do. So it's taking away some of the yet more local control from the school districts, where we've already had our budget passed. 95% of the state districts have had their budget passed. But nevertheless, this is something that the governor is insisting on, so I'm not sure where that's going to land, but that's kind of what we're dealing with.
And my understanding is the current yield is higher than.
It is higher.
What we proposed in our budget and that was approved, so that would actually be a lower tax.
Correct. And that's without this buy down. I would assume if in fact this happens, we will have a decrease in our property tax. I mean, if in fact or very close.
But it also is a setup for next year.
It's setting it up for next year where we're gonna have, this is just kicking the can down the road. It wouldn't be if the cost-saving mechanisms were going to definitively save these monies, and that's just not the case.
And I know I read something on the student-staff ratios as well.
Right.
Is that a component of?
That's a component. That's one of the cost-saving measures that the governor wants to, the administration wants to foist on school districts. In the bill that passed the General Assembly, there is a study. I know I don't like studies very much, but it is to actually get into recommended, and this is something that the VSBA supported and we've supported, give us some guidance on recommended best practices for staff ratios, given different types of school situations.
But regardless, even without that recommendation, whatever the target was, South Burlington in aggregate is below that right now, correct?
Yeah, we're better than that target by quite a bit, actually. So, yeah, but it doesn't affect us so much. I mean, but always have to remember that what happens all across the state affects what our what the yield is going to be. And that's also been the big argument for moving health insurance to a state negotiation, which I know we have opposed, but I'm starting to come around to that maybe overall it would be better because many districts haven't done as well as we have as far as really, keeping the health insurance costs somewhat in check, despite the fact that it's going up significantly here as well. Any event, so much to be reported in some time, hopefully before July 1st. So David can keep getting paid, because there will be no money and the government will shut down.
Let's hope that doesn't happen, for many reasons, right?
Any other comments on legislative activity? All right, we'll move on to master planning and visioning.
So we have this on our agenda for tomorrow night, and we've allotted a good amount of time. So I kind of just want to do a little bit of housekeeping with regard to this, and I know a lot of you don't necessarily have your notebook, so some of you have by your place, you have the inserts for the pages that need to be inputted. They're got a little yellow card on the front of them, so we've changed the table of contents a little bit, and we've, appropriately noted what pages need to be changed. So I would recommend that you take them with you tonight, and that will be your one assignment for tomorrow,
I don't have to put all these pages back in their place.
That's right.
Left it here last time.
Right. So it would be recommended that you do that. Tomorrow we'll go through it in more detail. What I wanted to do is just, again, for the public, just give a couple quick updates. Again, I have received the ATC report on the sound. I got it yesterday, and we've asked, again, the bones of the report seem really quite informative, but there's like a need for a glossary. There's some clarifying questions that we had. So we've pushed those back to ATC, and they're going to turn around and get them to us as soon as possible. I don't envision that that's going to be part of the tomorrow night conversation, unfortunately. We did set a delivery date, much sooner, so that it could be. Presently, and I talked to Elizabeth briefly, on the 6th, we'll have back on the master planning and visioning, and ATC I have coming to actually do a presentation on the sound study that they did. In addition to the 4 components identifying, so the 4 areas that we had identify specific needs and upgrades at the high school. Again, that work, as you know, has been completed, and we currently have that, and that is in your book. So again, I just wanted to make sure we're just providing some clarity. That was provided to the board on the 18th. Again, a lot of information in there. The next was to identify a system to monitor and report on issues specific to the district. And again, one of those specific issues certainly was around one of the components that we're talking about is kind of the environmental concerns specific to schools. Obviously, one of those areas was the ATC report. And again, as I said just now, we received that on the 15th, yesterday. The other one was to develop a contingency plan, and I've, again, made it pretty apparent that our work with the Burlington International Airport and the FAA, I have still not heard another update from either the airport or the FAA on where we are with that soundproofing grant. I'm hopeful to hear about it soon. That's a major component around having that contingency plan in effect for whatever outcomes may yield around sound. And then the strategic plan and having some measurement of assessing kind of through a SWOT analysis type is what was used. That is in part connected to what's in your packet or what was just provided to you in the packet. In your, it says to go to tab 3, and tab 3 at the very end, and page 33 gets into the threshold analysis tool. And so that is, again, the process by which we're going to be using to provide you folks with kind of some recommended next steps. So in that threshold, you see the conditions, a low level of concern is evident, a 0, a 1 potential, 3 high level. And we've got some changes to make. Well, actually, page 34 is going to have some slight changes. Again, we continue to work on this. This is John Stewart, John Aubin, and myself. But we'll spend some time, obviously, when we get the data and I can populate the data. My expectation is on the 6th of June. By then, I will have understood fully the ATC report. The ATC will report on it, and in the threshold analysis, I will include that in my analysis, which you'll have there. And that, I've listed the questions on the left related to the sound, but I have not yet obviously populated the concerns specific to that. So again, that's the brief update. I think the other component was there was a question that came in around last week. I think it was Martin, and those are by your side, that was specific to the pay rates on the pay tables for each of the schools. And so both John and John, again, in reviewing that, there is some changes to that, which changes the sheets in which you're going to put back in there. And again, when we looked at over time the salary averages, we recognized that we could make a slight change there, again, based on kind of our run rate history there. So that was specific to the salary teacher cohort at the elementary, and then the next page demonstrates and shows you a little bit of that specific information through 17. So those are the responses to what Martin, you had brought up. I think it was Martin. It could have been somebody else, but that's where we're at. So that's kind of where I'd like to just leave it, unless, that's where we are for tonight. Tomorrow night, we'll go through in more detail the threshold analysis. We'll be walking through some of that pretty specifically and spending a considerable amount of time there. Again, I did think it was important to share this. This meeting is certainly televised. Tomorrow night is not televised. Obviously, we'll be taking minutes, but I wanted to make sure that the community is aware that we're working through master planning and visioning. We're working towards me giving you suggested next steps, options around what we should be considering on, important factors affecting the district. So anyway, I don't know, board members have anything else you want to add to that? More questions you have?
Seeing no other questions or comments, we will move on to agenda item 12, school-based continuous improvement plans.
Yeah, so Stuart, you are on.
So hopefully we can make this fairly brief. I was here 2 board meetings ago with the school, the district-based continuous improvement plans. Continuous improvement plans are part of the EQS, the laws on which we now do schools. All of these have been submitted to the state, and they need to be approved by the school board. They are part of not only just our own plans and the way that we do work, and this is, of course, phase 1, that is what we're going to do. By the fall, phase 2, that is how successful and how we measure, and eventually phase 3, how we sum up the year and make the next continuous improvement plan, will be something that will continue to come in front of the board, though not by me personally. And but this is also relates to our consolidated federal program money, that is Title I, which is for students in poverty, Title II, professional development, Title III, EL or English language learning, and Title IV, which is wellness and technology, which is new money for us, and that we understand will be. So in order for us to access and build our plans around that, the state has to approve these plans as well as you. So it's here for action, and unless there are any other questions, you can see that they're basically based on the same model.
So, just a basic question is, what, is the audience for this just the state and then the federal agencies?
No, the audience is the teachers and the schools that they're done. These were all done by committees made up of school and community members in those schools, and the schools go over them in their faculty meetings because they're the people who will implement and measure. So in the end, it is a school-based and the other one a district-based continuous improvement plan. It's based on data that we also, we've done a survey using the MTSS criteria in most schools for 5 years. So that's part of the data that drove this in each of the schools. And we provided that as well to the state, that needs analysis of why these are the things that we do.
So I guess part of the reason I asked is there's a lot of terminology that is kind of inside baseball.
Yeah, amen.
And, well, yeah, and if it's a tool strictly for the educator, that's one thing, but it is being presented to a layperson board member who goes through and says, you know, and even after 8.5 years of looking at this stuff, still questions come up like, what the heck is metacognition, for instance?
Thinking about thinking.
Yeah, I guess I probably could have figured that out, I suppose, but still, I don't know what the learning commons are. I guess that's something going on at the high school. You probably have told me several times what the universal design for learning is, but.
Well, now I know what UDL is. Thank you.
Yes, universal,
Use context
yeah,
clues.
so, I mean.
Sensitivity to glossary.
Well, yeah, I mean, if this is something that.
Spelling it out.
Yeah, and the other thing, I'm gonna be hard pressed to approve the middle school one because it seems incomplete. At least the copy that I received doesn't have, some of the things filled out. Just looking at it, when you look at personalization, it doesn't have the needs assessment summary or the identified problem of practice. I think it doesn't have that. Was it true for Chamberlain?
Let me be clear, because it shouldn't be at the middle school. I have to look at that. At 2 of the elementary schools, because personalization is not required by the EQS till 7th grade, they decide not to focus on personalization at this time, which is acceptable to the state. I'm going to find the middle school one here because they should have quite a bit about personalization. It's all they've been doing for the last several years as PLPs. If you have any students in the system, you would know.
Yeah, so it's scattered throughout. There's, but I think Martin's specific on some of the areas that are not.
It's mainly the middle school, but, so, all right, couple other questions, and there's a few different places, for instance, on page 4 of the high school, where there are things that might have budget implications, and I just want to flag those if they're a question of whether they're in the budget. These are things that we have to just be looking out for, such as the extended day in school year to provide extra direct instruction to students failing to attain proficiency, and for EL students, that's in the high school. And then in Orchard, which also doesn't have just budget implications, but perhaps implications for what we're doing with master planning and visioning, there's a couple places that talk about infrastructure. Maybe it's also in the middle school. Yeah, no, it's in Orchard, where they're talking about shared space for instructional support teachers, and the last in the social emotional learning, providing time and space for children impacted by trauma. I don't know how that intersects with these other initiatives like the master planning and visioning and budget. I guess that's a question.
So 2 pieces of that. I can't answer the part about the Orchard with the structural piece, because that could have implications. But the others, again, remember, this is about the federal funding. These are areas that we now have strategies that we use federal fund, extended day, extended school year. Those don't come out of the district budget. But if they're not named, they won't come out of the federal grant money either.
Excellent for naming it then, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, no, that answers that question,
And then
certainly.
I would say on anything that speaks to like this, spaces and things of that nature, I mean, currently, we're, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it's good
And
to
so
get
it's
input.
identified in
Yeah.
there. It doesn't mean that we have all of the space that we need, but we're utilizing spaces in the most universal way we can, i.e. at Orchard, so that's, it's not, I understand the board's concern that is it leading towards that
No, I
in order
think
to
we need
work
to
the
be aware.
continuous tour, you gotta do that, but it is in part harmony with, some of the things that we're gonna be talking about around areas of weaknesses or needs, as we've delineated in the threshold analysis.
Yeah, no, I think
Yep.
to be aware.
Good?
So Stuart, to clarify, where there's a goal that has TBD on it, does that mean it's not identified as a priority for that particular school?
Tell me which school you're talking about.
Well, I just happen to be in the middle school,
So the middle school, I think that, I'm gonna bring that one back, because I think that identified problem of practice missing line should be there. Personalization is a big priority for the middle school, and as you look at their goals, you can see that there are quite a few goals related to that, as well as, where it's missing from the MTSS as well. I would tell you that the middle school one, which was the latest one and the last one I got, I will bring back and ask you not to do that one tonight. But in Orchard?
Yeah, and it may be just the way,
Well, it's the way the federal report, these forms have to be filled out.
Yeah,
Stuart,
maybe the
and so
form.
what the board, I know, is leaning towards, where anytime there's a blank on goals and it's to be determined, so, on.
Well, the Phase 2 stuff is not in there at all, because basically it should go as far as goals, what we want to accomplish, what changes can we make that will result, and how will we know the changes? And after that, it's always blank, because we don't know, in terms of the other phases, what the test and the pilot and the implement and spread will be. That's not what's required.
Yeah, see, that's
at this
where I
time
think
at
the
this
board's,
stage.
Okay,
the
that's
board's
where-
confused, I
Right.
mean. I'm
So
not
this
confused.
was true of the
Blank.
other one as well. So the focus is on the Phase 1 part of the plan. That's the part that's due the state.
Populated.
The other part will be populated for November, and then populated for the end of the year as it rolls over to the new continuous improvement plan. This is a new process for the state, and so it's not everything at once.
okay.
So those are complete. The only one that's not complete is the missing gaps in the middle school. So I'd like to withdraw that one until we fix it, because as I said, the personalization that's not at Central and not at Chamberlain, that is because, again, personalization is not required, and they didn't want to focus on it with the other activities that they had done. And our understanding is that's fine with the state.
So the request then would be for the board to adopt all the other ones minus,
Without the middle
minus
school,
Tuttle?
and that we would bring the
And
middle
we
school
bring that
back
back
for
on
further action.
June 6th, is that gonna
That'll be
work?
fine.
So do I
That would
have
be
a
the ask.
motion to accept the continuous improvement plans for all the facilities except Tuttle? Have a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
Sorry, just one more time. So these are standardized forms that need to be submitted to the Agency of Education.
They actually have all been submitted to the Agency of Education.
Okay.
at this
But,
moment.
but they need to
For
have.
review.
Okay, but as part of their ultimate completeness, they
They-
need board approval.
Right.
To be on, okay. And it's a condition precedent to getting funding, or it's just a requirement of state statute, or both?
Or both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's both. And again, it's a new process for us too, so again, guided by the agency, we're working to comply.
Alex?
So since we're not acting on the middle school one, shall we put that on the agenda for June 6th?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to policy review.
Okay, so policy B1 and B2, this is the board member conflict of interest in the code of conduct. There were specific questions that came back, and we've been working with the VSBA around whether or not should be remedies included in those. And so we've asked that question. We've really I mean, they've acknowledged they're working on it, but we've gotten no response specific to a resolve. So my recommendation would be that the board can consider approval of the policy with kind of the caveat that we're going to continue to be awaiting some guidance from VSBA in doing a review. They did indicate that they will be doing a review of the policies this summer, starting with kind of their oldest policies, and we'll look at these particular policies with the questions that we've had in mind. So,
Well, these aren't warned for action.
they're not warned tonight, but I'm just saying that
So-
we would put them forward, and it's unlikely we're going to get any newer information from VSBA.
So we would not approve them as is, but put them on a future agenda after the.
I would recommend that we approve them at a appropriately warned next meeting.
Okay.
And that we're able to do that, and with a caveat that we understand that VSBA is working on it, and when they come out, if they come out with a change, a recommended change, then we can bring them back up again.
Okay.
So can you remind me what the status of the school freedom of the press policy?
That
Is
one
that what
is,
it is?
yeah,
Okay.
it is on.
Thank you.
So conflict of
didn't look that
interest
far
and
ahead.
code of conduct will.
Go for action
At
at, I don't know, we have to look at that June 6th, I don't know.
the June 6th.
Yeah,
And then we also have a review of the guidelines on social media,
right.
which everybody should have a red line version.
That's not different from last time we saw it, is that right?
That's,
Excuse me.
Bless you, Elizabeth.
that is as was last modified.
I continue to have no changes on it.
This one doesn't require a formal adoption, actually revisions.
It's not technically a policy, it's more of a guideline, but we had said that we were going to update it every so often.
Okay, and we don't have to warn action, but can we, through consensus, adopt this at this point?
Yep, you sure can. We make the
So
changes.
is there
and then
any
you have
further
it.
discussion or input to the social media communication guidelines? All right, seeing none, by consensus, those will be adopted.
Great.
All right. So we'll move on to the 2018-19 school board meeting schedule.
And that's in your packet. It's green.
Could you maybe set up monthly meetings? Quarterly?
I second.
We can make them really long meetings,
Ha ha
Steve.
ha, silly board member.
Okay.
So this is the first year since I've been on here that I'm not gonna have to miss the deer hunting season, board meeting. So, thank you for that.
Yeah?
Yeah. Or maybe no thank you, maybe I've always enjoyed having that day off. I will not be on, I know in advance I won't be here on the July 11th, but other than that, everything
He's on
else
the
is-
board meeting schedule.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I jump?
I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
that's the
wait.
first, that's number 14, isn't it?
Oh, am I on, I'm on the work
You're
plan.
doing-
We're on the
yeah,
work
I'm
plan,
on the-
they're on
Went to
this.
the work
This
plan.
chart,
We're on this.
and then the
Wait.
green chart, right?
Wait, did I skip?
But I can't participate
I was
by
thinking Martin
phone.
was wanting to X out of some of the work plan things or something.
No, I was on
July
number 14.
11th, we
Of this
have
year, yeah.
conflicts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
There you go.
Stuart.
And you won't be here. Yeah.
So Bridget, no?
I can be on by phone, but I can't be here in person.
I'm not gonna volunteer to be on by phone.
Okay, so maybe we'll have a look at either what the agenda is or possibly.
No, we can look
She's
at it.
much more dedicated.
Cover your ears.
I would be
Bang.
here if it were a week later.
Oh, no,
That
this one's
helps
not
out.
hunting.
Yeah.
Although I will be at the hunting camp.
I was
on
gonna
that
say, that's the
day.
wrong time of
Are
year.
there any other dates anybody knows they have conflicts?
Sadly, no.
I don't, I just, the May 15th to June 12th, what holiday is the June 12th meeting moved for out at the end of the schedule? It just seems like we end up with a lot of stuff at the end of the year, and that's almost a month between board meetings, and I'm just wondering whether that's realistic. I don't know what.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I don't,
But I'm not 100% sure. I don't have my
so,
backup.
again, this is part of why we're doing this.
I think Ramadan has just started.
So you're,
Yeah.
specifically about that next year, May and June, being a long period of time between them, right, Bridget?
It's a month between those two,
Mhm.
yeah.
We tend to do a lot of stuff to try to get in before we all
June.
disappear on vacations and whatnot, so.
May. Mhm. Well, we can, well, that's part of why we're doing that. We can look at that block between there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And have we, let's see, for this coming year, have we kept it to one meeting in July?
Well, that's what we were trying to do, I think, in respect for everybody having a break, but I don't know now, given.
Well, we
Martin,
can check
maybe
that
to
July
see if-
11th date, but if there could be some effort made to.
Have it earlier? or
Well, just minimize the meetings over the summer, so there's opportunity for.
Well, we'll look,
family
let
breaks.
me look at July 11th, and maybe that can be one that we forego.
Mhm.
Although, the reason for that is hires, right? That's why we probably did that, right, Delina? Why? Not why we, well, see, we do, any last minute hiring, if we have things that are going on, what's the
Right.
July 15th deadline? Well, we could, that could be the sole purpose of that particular meeting, would be for hires. You know, so it would be short, as long as we had majority, it would be for hires so that we could get contractual, you know.
Really challenges you need to sign stuff. And,
But in your absence, we could, you know, Elizabeth could sign in your absence, or any other, as long as it was delineated in the meeting, if, like, authority is given to,
Yep.
you know, Steve to sign on your behalf, whatever. Fine, or in this case, Elizabeth is here, and she's the chair, can sign it. Yep. Okay.
Okay. All right, so now we will move to the work plan.
This all looks so open, doesn't it? Like,
well, one thing that I noted was missing was master planning, really, because it doesn't sort of fall within our specific policies
Right.
as cleanly as everything else.
what would most likely be a community linkage, but it happens through, you know, it's spread all over the place, actually.
Yeah.
I have a question. Don't we get started on the budget a little sooner than December? Or is that,
Well, we do, you give me some, I usually ask for some guidance, and I
Okay.
used to wind it in there earlier with just some board direction around probably November. But then really we start talking, you know, we're ramping up the conversation and getting first round review of what we know of the state funding models, et cetera, and that's where it really starts to move fast there. But October, November, I usually get feedback, but remember, oftentimes we haven't had any specific direction from the agency around what the funding model is going to be. So.
Yeah,
We,
I've raised it before. I would
to
really
start
like
it
to
earlier?
see, well, what I would like to see earlier, frankly, is a revision of the template for the budget book. I think the budget book is pretty unclear, and I think this has been a challenge we've had for a few years. And I think something that we can do before we have specific guidance from the agency is do some revision and try to get the template nailed down. So, because what ends up happening is we kind of leave it and say, well, we'll fix that when it's time to get the budget book out. But then that span of like 3 days after we actually board approve the budget, and then it has to be in the budget book. It's just not enough time to make major revisions. So I think we should have a look at the budget book
So,
over the summer, and then, you know, at some point in September, October, you know, maybe approve
Yeah,
more
so
what
maybe-
the look of that book.
the suggestion could be in other business and admin reports, maybe we could, you know, we have budget scattered in there, obviously that's redundant, but maybe if that's workable, a couple board members perhaps could work with me and appropriate staff to look at that early September, something like that.
Well, and actually,
Maybe.
the ends monitoring in September around how does the budget affect the ends, that's a good time to talk about. How the ends are communicated in terms of what
Yeah.
the budget is really funding.
Yep. Yeah.
I seem to recall last year we were trying to get a beat on what the property tax rate might be, given some roll forwards I think that John had done. Fortunately, we kind of under-promised and over-delivered when everything came out in the wash, but I think we had an article in the other paper in November, starting to, if I'm remembering that properly,
I think so.
to sort of invite people to start getting engaged in the budget process and also really try to manage expectations for what the tax increase was going to be. I don't know if that would be like a community linkage line and another business reports line sometime in October or November.
Yeah, there's a lot of other actions that are going on in the district that are, not necessarily delineated, like when you look at your board agendas in the past, there's a lot of other stuff that's not in here, but remember, under policy governance, these are kind of the categories of board work plan, but I don't disagree with that, and I think that specific topic around budget timing, we provided you, actually, John, and I provided you with a timeline of, seeking guidance, and probably was November or October even, and then, we kind of walked through that kind of delineated process. I think it's helpful to get it out there. So I think we can make those.
The pro formas, World left to itself, this is how it's shaping up. And
Yeah.
the worse that looks, the better, the earlier, I think.
So would you like to, I don't know exactly where to put it, but budget book, I heard?
Yeah, I mean,
reformatting?
other business and admin reports,
I couldn't put it
but it's
in here,
probably
Yep.
early, in the fall sometime,
Mm-hmm.
because December's too late to start.
And then maybe budget communication, and ends monitoring, right? We
Yeah.
put in there, connected to the budget stuff. It's kind of hard to see this, the part of what's in the past, for Alex, who's newer, on the work plan, we typically have been looking at this a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's my issue. This typically, we need to keep it in the front of our book and pay attention to this more diligently, because what happens is, some of our monitoring reports get pushed, and then it's easy to get, really behind. And some of them are important to inform other things, like financial conditions and auditing, those are important, maybe end terms that lead into the budget work, and I think, for me, next year, a goal will be to make sure that we have this, out more. Where are we at with this? Should we be moving it? Because right now, I think we probably would say, had we been looking at this, we would have moved some of these things a little bit. We have, for, again, new board members, we have, over the years, tweaked these pretty considerably to get them where they are today. However, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to look at them.
Sorry to raise Mr. Thing one more time, but I know in December, I think December 31st is our deadline for that SWOT analysis. And I think we're confusing a little bit the threshold
19.
analysis. Is it 19?
I think it's 19, isn't it?
I was pretty sure it was December 31st of 2018 for the SWOT analysis, I thought, because we said that was going to be a pretty high level.
I'm on
And
the same,
I think we're
switching over.
I think we're confusing the threshold analysis and the SWOT analysis a little bit as we're discussing the work plan, master planning and visioning. And to my knowledge, we haven't really started the SWOT analysis. And we've talked about the threshold analysis for the elementary schools, but as a district, like what our real strengths and weaknesses are, we really haven't opened that discussion. And I feel like that needs to be somewhere
I'm
in here
kind
so
of-
that we can hit that December deadline.
I'm kind of using, in my threshold analysis, at least the summary. I'm using I'm using the components of the SWOT analysis to help provide some next step direction. So what are the strengths of our current situation relative to elementary schools? Using the 6 or 7 components that we're looking at, what are the strengths of the district as those are assessed? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities and threats? So I don't disagree, though, whole globally district, absolutely, because the high school, remember, as of the starting July 1, will be more of an analysis around what are we looking for that's going to support the education delivery that we need to provide, right?
Yep.
So we've only done a half of that component. That will need to wrap into that final SWOT analysis, if
Yep.
you will. So
Yep.
I don't disagree. So capturing that as you're thinking somewhere in here, right, Bridget? In
Yeah,
December,
I mean,
yeah.
at least a December,
Yep,
if there's
that's
sort of
good.
a December deadline for that, so I don't know if there needs to be.
So MPV
Yeah.
somewhere. good. That's why we're looking at it.
Yeah, I think this one, David, I mean, in the past, I think from a board perspective, we set this once and then kind of hold you accountable
Yep.
to follow it. But I think if you want it to be a little bit more dynamic and have routine input, maybe it should come up quarterly with a revisit, something to
Yeah,
that
I
effect.
recognize that. Yeah. And we do, I mean, part of what you see is, you see monitoring reports come up and somebody like, well, how did that come up? And
Right.
it's being driven by, obviously, our work plan.
Yeah.
And you also know that we've pushed some of those off and et cetera. Okay, that's good.
All right, should we move on to other paper articles?
So I might have to trade months with Bridget, possibly. I may have nothing to report by the 28th. When is the 28th? What day is that? Is that next week? No, it's the following week.
It's due the 31st, right?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong month.
You think you'll likely have some updates on,
I don't know. I
even if it's, I suppose,
So if you want to, write yours for the next month, and we can decide whether to put, if the legislature is done, because it is the education that is in fact holding us up.
Are there other topics we want to consider
Yeah, that's the other
adding,
thing. We
or
can-
might be more topical? And we should kind of go out at least one more from a scheduling standpoint.
I'm conspicuous by my absence in the last four names, so I think I'm on the hook for the August 2nd article. I'm willing to solicit topics.
We've had our students right before, too.
I don't know, I think, graduation.
Yeah, I was gonna
It's
say, I
always a
think- I
nice,
think-
like a story that has some
I think Alex is
culmination
off
about
the hook.
graduation.
I mean,
Those of you
Arnold.
who've been there, it's, I don't know, from the board perspective, what you witness and see.
Isn't that kind of student outcomes? I mean, wouldn't,
Well, I'm
I'm
just,
not trying to voice this on Bridget. Bridget's just giving me a look over here saying, you.
Well, no, the look is, the truth is, I haven't even really thought about what would be in that article at all, and I'm just conscious of a deadline in 2 weeks,
Well,
given what's on the calendar
One
between now and then.
recommendation, we, that we will not have had this, let's see, what's the June meeting?
Well,
June
here's an
6th.
idea for
Maybe.
the 531 article, or the one that's due on the 31st of May, is we're having this safety summit.
22nd.
I know that we just ran in
Yeah, we
April
did just
one,
run
but
one,
there
yeah.
will be a safety summit, and there will be a lot of outcomes probably from that, or discussion around that people will be curious about.
Yeah, that one I think could be a good one, and then we will likely have taken action on the Black Lives Matter recommendation, as well as,
We won't, but
No, we
the
won't have,
31st of
June
May.
no, it won't be that time. That's
June
why I was asking
6th.
about the June. Yeah, that's not enough time then.
Well, the June one, I should have a legislative update, if we still want to do that one.
The June 20, the one that will run.
June 28th.
28, you gotta have it due. Yeah.
So we could switch Martin to the next one, do the safety summit on the 31st.
And Arnell or Alex, do you want to write that one, since you guys helped
I was about to ask whether
organize that? Yeah.
I'd be totally open to it, especially if you're busy with graduation and stuff. But I could definitely do it myself, yeah. But
That'd be
obviously work with you.
I mean, that's valid. I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
But maybe that could be a collaborative effort. Like, I wouldn't want you
Yeah.
to write the entire thing on your own. Like, I'd be sure to help with that.
Yes.
But since the other paper article only allows one author,
Yeah, yeah.
we could have that be under your name and
So you
I
don't
can
stress
assist.
about it. Yeah,
Okay.
so when
I
is that
think
one
that's a great
due?
idea.
So
By the
that
end of the month?
would be for the 31st, Arnell.
So that's when
Yeah.
it's
So
due.
it's due on the 31st?
It's due on the 31st.
Yes.
After the safety summit, but.
But, that would be one
very
that.
topical.
It would be very topical, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that-
I'm
that's
happy to
totally
help Arnell, too, with that.
Okay, sounds good.
So then we'll do the legislative update next. So do we want to move student outcomes to the
I wrote one in.
726?
Sure.
Especially because of graduation.
Stuart, I have a question for you. When do we get SBAC data from the kids who took it this spring? Does that not come till fall?
We actually have most of that data, but it's not public data yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends when the state does its rollout, which has been early September usually.
Okay.
So that's the problem. But there is that debate because with it being computerized, we actually do have,
You know it already.
most
Yeah.
our results in.
It's not embargoed, right?
It is embargoed for,
yeah,
you
so
can't
we have-
publicize, you can use it with teachers,
Yeah,
and you could
for
use it with
planning.
teacher, with students for planning, but you can't like say, this is our scores,
Mhm.
until the state does their press release. But I could find out what their plan is around that, I could write to the acting secretary and see
When they're
Yeah.
gonna-
if there's gonna be a.
Because I'm not
closer
trying to
window.
reason out of writing an article. I'm just wondering if we get SBAC data in early September and we've just published an article on student outcomes on August 2nd,
Right.
that's going to be a little weird. Because if student outcomes were going to happen, we're going to write it in June for July, that's one thing. But if it comes out just a few weeks before we actually have the data, that feels a little
latest data.
weird. So I'm happy to either pick a different topic for that July 26th deadline, or I'm happy to still keep my hand raised for the next one. Although, again, it's probably not even the next one, because the next
Yeah, it
one's
would be
due
the-
on
it'd be the
August
other one.
30th.
Yeah, I would think to really be safe, but I will find out, but I think to really be safe, that's a fall
It's a fall thing.
article.
Okay. So why don't we shift student outcomes, is 9:27 late enough?
I
I
think
think
so.
that would be safe. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So
we
could-
don't have the Black Lives Matter flag one in here?
We don't,
do
but we could also expand the topic to a diversity, equity, inclusion
Mhm.
update.
I would be
do know
happy to
there's
write that one, too.
Significant training that's going on
That's right, courageous conversations.
over the, is that over the summer, or is it?
Yep.
Right, well, it's right before the start of the school year.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit later too, but that would be a good maybe 8:30 submission? Or could it be done on 7/26?
Probably, no, it would have to be 8:30. It would be.
Well, if you want to talk about what happened as opposed to what's going to
Going to
happen.
happen. There'd be some feedback, and that might be, what we've done. So, and
All right, so really right now, we've got quite a few out. We're missing a 7/26 submission. And from a
Right.
timing standpoint,
yeah.
topics that would be of interest and timely.
Summer vacation. Kidding.
Well, I mean, this, and maybe this one's too esoteric for the public, but we are getting ready to hire John's replacement, and we're restructuring that position
Mhm.
a little bit. So I don't
A
know
little bit
if,
about the administration, or?
how we're restructuring that a little bit. I don't know if that is going to be interesting enough for the general public, but it's something
That's
that's
good.
happening
of
before
a-
then, and then, could be reported out on.
Or even just a general update of the change in general. in
Yeah,
central
who's,
office
what
in
are we
general,
looking like? Yeah.
since
There are a
too
lot
many-
of, yeah,
since
there are a
there are
lot
too
of
many
central
people
office
within that.
changes. Yeah,
It's
I mean,
just
that
an
could be a
intro to
broader
that and
article.
all.
I like
Yeah.
it. It's good.
Yeah, the other topic is, I'm somewhere in here, we will have updates on master planning and visioning, so
Yeah.
that would be another. So I can take I guess I'll take the July one then.
July, that 26th one.
Yeah.
Wasn't
And then Bridget, why don't we put you on the, well, unless you
Still
want to.
staying with student outcomes, or am I moving up to one of these earlier ones too? So 5:31 we said
Well,
would be
actually,
safety.
Steve, you could do the restructuring, right?
Sure.
So if we can put you on that.
Sixth.
I think I should do the DEI one then, and you stay on student outcomes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
All right, so what date do you want me to do?
So that'll be 7/26.
Okay.
Okay. And Alex, you are going to be up here soon, so. think
Oh,
of your
yeah,
time.
well, I've already written myself down as a volunteer for August, but it looks like I'm being crowded out.
Oh, well.
If you're
Don't
feeling
have
left
to
out,
be.
we can
Don't
fix
have to
that.
So
Do you want to take the August one?
Sure.
Great.
So just for so I get it written down correctly, who's doing May?
That'd be
So-
Arnell and Alex. We're gonna
Safety
do
Summit.
safety
Okay.
summit, sort
Okay,
of update
safety
on
summit,
safety summit.
okay.
And then it was
Legislative
update.
That's
update.
Martin, right?
Yep, then restructuring, central office restructuring, Steve.
Steve.
Then DEI will be Alex, and student outcomes, Bridget.
Okay, and so.
And I will definitely
so you
be
have a
up again.
September?
Yes, I have
Okay.
September.
I have
You good, Delina? Did you get those? Do you want to
think so.
repeat them again?
I'll send them to Elizabeth and she can change them.
Awesome.
All right, so setting the agenda for the June 6th meeting.
So we needed to pull over, what did I say, June 6th. Total action plan, right on. Which is not on here, right? CIP. Tuttle. FHTMS action plan. We'll add that. We're gonna put those on for third readings, the policies. The social media.
The social media's done, yep.
Yep, so that's been good, that's off. We've got that free speech on there. Update on master planning. Seems like I know I'm forgetting something we just said
Black
earlier.
Lives Matter flag?
That's right.
Oh, yep.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're good.
Good. All right, future agenda items. Anything that needs to come off, get scheduled, or it be added?
Are we ever gonna do anything about approval of accounts payable checks over $50,000?
That's a future.
I'm trying to recall how this got on.
I think by the time you forget why we have it there, it's time to take it off.
I think it had been raised by the previous board.
I was gonna
frankly.
say, I think it's been
It
on
had been
there.
raised by the previous board
Well-
about whether we really needed to do it or not, whether it was actually a board level.
Oh, it's currently in the executive limitations of the policy of,
Yep.
on the superintendent, so I don't have authority for items that are over 50, and that's why they appear.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure it's been there the entire time I've been on the board.
Oh, it
I'm-
definitely
I'm
has.
quite
So is it a
amenable to taking it
policy
off.
review?
Well, it would be an
issue?
executive limitation
Right.
under policy governance, whether you want to change that, and I don't know, you know.
I think we need to call.
Doesn't seem-
I think we need to call Julie and ask her why she had on future agenda items.
I don't know who it was, actually. but-
Things seem to be working fine. Are you being harmed by the current
No, but I
policy
think-
in any way, or?
No, I'm not. I think it came up as a result of board conversation, like, if it's already been approved, you know.
If it's
and-
already been paid, basically, because it needs to be paid in a
Yeah.
timely manner, we're sort of approving it after the fact.
But I don't think, I personally think the way it's going, those are high level, I think it's fine to highlight those and for you to see them. But we don't spend a ton of time on them. It does give you an indication whether it's kind of a run rate of some of those bigger checks.
It always does bring up questions when you get new
And I
board
think
members
it's
on.
the
in terms
transparency part of it is
I think
why
it's
the
fine,
limitation
yeah.
policy.
That's good.
I make,
All right,
yeah,
we're
let's
striking
cross
that one.
out.
Oh, boy, now Diane Bugby is gonna be really happy.
You're making progress there.
Well, we just talked about it.
Yes, you did.
Yes, it's done, yeah. And how about on the non-union support staff employee manual?
We're close. We've been working hard on it. It's been a lot of, Karen's been working.
Okay.
Those of you who know Karen, she's not. There's a lot going on with,
Right.
like, pay grades in
Mhm.
there, and so.
What about update on eds monitoring? It seems like does that have any particular provenance there, or?
Well, it's on your work plan.
Yeah.
Ends monitoring,
Yeah,
so.
we could take it off because.
I was gonna
it's on
say,
the
I think we
plan.
do that.
Okay, we can strike it. There's no collective
Again,
memory
we
as to why
typically
it's
don't-
on there.
I mean, we don't question a lot when we just add a future agenda items, and sometimes, as you said, it
Well, I wonder about the global executive constraint on community feedback, whether we need to actually get that on an agenda pretty soon. I mean, maybe June 6th, just 'cause I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of feedback.
Could somebody tell me in one sentence, what does that mean?
Global executive constraint?
On community, yeah, global executive constraint community feedback.
Yeah, so it's in one of your, let's see.
Treatment of community, isn't it?
Yeah.
Treatment of community.
I have to like hold you back. No, you're not an executive, you're legislative, but.
Yeah, the
Treatment of
global executive
community.
constraints, just the policy governance, all the limitations.
Yeah,
that we
and
have,
it's
that
connected
the
to
superintendent shall
2.3.
not
Right.
mistreat the community.
It comes up, I don't, again, that's the problem, when we put those on there, I don't know that we said why they initially came on
Yeah.
there.
I mean, I think federal and state education policies, I might have been guilty of that, because with the change of
Yes, and
administration,
no child left behind, that whole
we
thing.
thought that might, and what was is it, now that's the Higher Education Act, but, I don't know that there's been a lot. That maybe warrants staying on here in case there are any dramatic changes, either at the federal or state level. But,
That could probably stay on there as a ongoing one.
yeah, it's like a risk, it's almost like a risk monitoring. What about employment contract procedures? Is that something that is begging to be discussed, or?
I think we got an update from you, David, in the past around the timing of issuing contracts, whether it's co-curricular or otherwise, and then also just the procedure on leaves. So, and in
we've
some
kind
ways,
of
I
updated those, yeah.
think we've gotten updates on the elements of contract procedures. So if everyone's comfortable, we can strike that one for now.
Well, I like this. You got 3 off of this list.
That's pretty good. I think the global executive constraint one, if I recall, and this actually will play into, I noticed that we're probably either behind or right in the time frame of superintendent evaluation.
It's on for,
We have it on?
just in policy.
Do we get it?
It's 3-2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. But I think the access and community feedback was part of that too. So let's leave it on for now.
And at the risk of going a bridge too far, tools for budget communication and transparency. So you guys have rolled out a Facebook page. There were numerous public presentations of the board, or the budget, this last time around. I don't know if we've kind of codified how many bites at the apple we're going to do, but, I mean, is there anything else on our, like, were we going to open a Twitter account? I don't know if we discussed.
That wasn't the point.
This
This came up during the election.
Uh-huh.
I was waiting for Martin. I was about to call him Martin to see if he wanted to bring it up again, because every 2 weeks he asks me, what are tools for transparency and what does it mean? During the election, it came up that people are very confused about how we present the budget, how we present how we've done versus last year's budget, how we present what the budget means for the tax rate and all of that. And that's where this discussion is coming up, in my mind, for revamping the budget book. And then we had also said last meeting that perhaps we need to talk about a very simplified tool that we can kind of share with the community as we're going through the budget discussion, that's not just so technical and detailed. We need all those details and all that technical output, but it's confusing for the community because it sort of feels like, from their perspective, they see these very, very detailed line item things with lots of different columns and lots of numbers, hard to figure out what's important to them, or what the summary is, and then they're just expected to sort of vote on whatever we pop out at the end. And so there was definitely a request from multiple community members that they see a little bit clearer how we did, or how we're doing versus last year's budget, and what the budget actually means, not just sort of in technical, state level speak or whatever, but that we somehow break this down so the community members really feel like they understand what's in the budget better. So part of that was why I was asking for a revision of the template of the budget book. And so, but the other question was whether there was some simplified spreadsheet that we could have, sort of the way we use our budget worksheet right now. That's a little more community friendly, so they can kind of understand the math. So I found myself, for example, fielding community questions about how does the budget worksheet, like, how do you get from the top to the bottom? And it's just not clear to the community how that worksheet actually turns into the numbers at the bottom or the estimates of the tax rate and all of that. And it feels like we could just design something that looks nicer and is easier for the community to understand so they can get a clearer picture.
So an observation and an offer. The observation is, let's keep it on there, because you have a very clear idea of the types of things that you want to do. That was good. That's,
And you guys will ask me every 2 weeks.
and the offer is, I will offer for the October 25th other paper article to run November 1st. I think that's the appropriate lead time to work with you on something like basically a budget 101 for the other paper.
Great.
Like, these are the 3 things or the 5 things that you need to look at, and
Okay.
A plus B times C, yeah,
Okay.
okay. So
that is
Steve.
for,
Is that easy?
which date, 10/25?
10/25.
I think that's about the right amount of lead time. Hey, folks,
Yeah.
this is coming in a few months, start paying attention.
Great,
So budget 101,
great.
okay. Good, but we'll keep it on there.
The other question on running effective public hearings, actually, that's sort of hearings/meetings. We did have, on the VHI board, we had legal counsel come in and talk about roles and responsibilities of a nonprofit board member. If it wasn't last week, it was, no, it can't be Monday. Yeah, I think it was Monday. But, and we manage our meetings largely by Robert's Rules of Order, but I don't think we've actually officially gone through training as a board. Is there any interest in maybe having a public session that has somebody who's knowledgeable speak to Robert's Rules of Orders, how it applies to a school board, and meetings versus hearings, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't even know if we need to bring in somebody to do a presentation. Perhaps we could, when you mentioned it, I thought, well, geez, there might be something good on YouTube.
Ooh, boy, that was coincidental.
Yeah, that was coincidental.
Well, I Vermont School Boards, School Boards Association is a resource
Yeah.
that we pay for. And
Yeah.
again, I think to Elizabeth's point, it's not that you're not doing a good job. It's not that we don't have some knowledge internally, and yourselves included. But it's always good to, get a little bit of this is part of why, there's ongoing board training opportunities, folks that, if you can go online and do that. So I think it's fine. It's always good to be a parent. I mean, when Elizabeth was saying that, I looked to our back page, which we often don't visit, public comment period, how do you run your meetings? Are you staying to some of those, thank the persons? And again, I think to Elizabeth's work tonight, she thanked the students that came and presented, how do you respond? Again, that's kind of some of the things that we did not used to happen in the past that we've at least identified. But I think it would be good to just say, hey, could you come and dedicate, a little bit of time at a board meeting to just talk to us? And maybe there's some other things too that you would like to gain some insight, like the question that we've asked them specific to board conflict of interest and policy governance or remedies.
I would like it, and I don't know that we could drag the public to listen to it, but it'd be helpful if we could. But especially with public hearings, we've not had too many in the tenure that I've been here, and they tend to be around very sensitive issues. And I think it would be helpful to have a little bit of training or guidance on that, and someone we could ask questions of as we do that.
Why don't we we'll follow up on that then. Okay. All right, anything else?
Teacher evaluation system update, didn't we have that as part of our, I thought we had that as part of our policy governance.
We've had it recently, but we want to keep it on there because it's still being rolled out.
Okay.
So,
All right, any modifications to the minutes of the May 2nd meeting?
We just recap, so we've struck the update on ends monitoring, the approval of accounts payable, checks over 50, and the employment contract procedures. Yes. Sorry, Madam Chair.
You're a little enthusiastic there. Isn't it?
Absolutely.
All right, the minutes of
Maybe
May
we'll
2nd?
wrap by 10:05
Any changes,
next time.
comments? Seeing none, those are approved. The consent agenda, any, I know I would like to pull the, it's network switches off that one.
Okay.
Let me make sure that's the one I wanted to pull. It's the one where we didn't go with the low bidder. Okay, I'll pull that one off.
Yeah, I was fine with the others.
Do you want to walk through the hires?
Yeah, so a lot of these are actually, because they were one-year onlys, are coming back to us. So these are individuals that signed after July 15th and are coming back. So that's Scott Carlson, Louise DeGiles, Rihanna Kim is speech and language, still been there. The new individuals, Rick Markite Guidance, as a result of a retirement. Megan Rice is coming in at .8. Again, that's part of that's what the allocated resources there at Rick Markot for that position. So that is the newest of that. So those are hires.
And is the speech language pathologist a full-time position?
It's a fragmented position. I mean, so this, we have typically had, it's not 1.0, I don't believe. Is that right, Stuart? Do you know at the?
Rhiannon does a number of things
Thanks.
for the district, so she's kind of like the district level. And Joanne had added into the budget a little bit more to
Yeah.
that, and that's what
So-
this is.
So this individual isn't employed at just?
One school,
No,
no.
she's
She
not
float-
employed
she
at
moves
just
around.
one. I don't know what her percentage is now. .6 Delina knows. She knows everything when it comes to who's got what FTE.
Yep. Again, we're, yeah.
Any other questions on the consent agenda? We'll just, if we could get some clarification, so
The
thank you
switch.
for that. The network switches
Mhm.
proposal.
Yep, great.
We're not required to take low bid for a lot of this stuff. We normally do if we can. The network switches was an instance where the vendor that offered that offered, I'll say, an obsolete switch. It wasn't obsolete just quite yet, but it had gone through what they call of end of sale life. They're no longer going to be selling that switch anymore. And I know I've been annoyed by, for example, I've had a couple of printers during my computer life that is no longer supported, and it basically stops working. The operating system doesn't talk to it anymore, so you throw the printer away even though there's nothing wrong with it. And in this case, the network switch gear would be in an end-of-life situation. They would no longer support it probably within the next 4 or 5 years after it went through this now end-of-sale period. So we didn't think it was worthwhile to buy like a thing that was becoming obsolete. We had budgeted the $40,000 for this gear, and we could have saved had we been willing to put up with this shortened life, off of that budget, but we didn't think that was a good idea. So we're recommending you go with the thing that has just started its life and is going to go through a 4 or 5 year sale life and then a 4 or 5 year end of life and be usable for 5 or 10 years instead of 4 or 5. So. The tech guys really researched this thing.
Yeah, I think from a rationale on this one, I made some inferences on the language, but if you're just looking at it on paper, it looks like we're accepting a bid at twice the amount.
It is, but it's nowhere near the same product.
It's a little bit problematic that they don't, so like in our bid specifications, it certainly, like this particular, it's probably true that this switch could work, right, John?
Oh, it'll work for
But-
a few years.
And then, then in those few years, you're gonna have to, buy something probably that will be higher than the 21.
Yeah.
I don't wanna claim that I know what I'm talking about with the switches, so, I think your
I'm
point's well
looking at it
noted.
kind of generically and just saying, either the
proposal.
this lower proposal did not meet the bid specifications. And I'm not sure I read that anywhere,
That would've
because that
been
would have
better
been,
clarity.
Well, I say it didn't, but we probably did not have in the bid spec. You can't quote something that has an imminent end of sale life coming up. And maybe we should, we just didn't I don't think we thought to do that, but we could try to
Well, in the
incorporate
past, we've
that
been
kind of
pretty
language.
clear with the technology stuff that we're not looking for, you know, I don't know what the right word is, you know, secondhand or.
Well, it helps to know
loan.
that what was budgeted for it, because that was an
Yeah,
expectation.
it was nearer that $40,000.
Right. So, I mean, there definitely could have been more information for me as a board member to say, what was the budget? What were the specifications that this other vendor didn't meet? And
Yeah.
I think that's helpful practice.
Point well taken.
Any other questions on that one?
So do you need a motion on that one since you took it off the?
I don't think we need a motion because we don't approve the consent agenda.
Well, no, you took it off the consent agenda. You removed it from the
Oh, I
consent
just
agenda.
made it a
so-
separate item.
Yeah, so now you have to essentially act on that item since you.
Motion to approve
Okay.
the bid for Optiv.
Second.
Network server, yeah.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
All right. Any questions on AP orders 43, 44, or 45? All right, seeing none, we have a request for 2 AP checks. They're both to Howard Center, correct? One in the amount of $102,336.36, and the other in the amount of $96,745.25. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion on those 2 AP checks to Howard Center? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Do I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? We are adjourned.